everybody, welcome to the Horror Screams podcast, an extension of the Horror Screams Video Vault website. For those who don't know who I am the CEO, founder, blah blah blah, of Horror Screams Video Vault. I was the madman that created all this stuff. But, as I am usually the host here, I am now passing things over to Stephen. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, good evening. Hi, Pete.
Yeah, Stephen West, who does a lot of writing for the website, he will now be the permanent host of the podcast because as the founder, I've got very busy things to do, plus other things like movies, for instance, like Casting Couch Slaughter, for instance, which is currently being on Indiegogo. If you want to check that out, Indiegogo, Casting Couch Slaughter. It's also on Facebook, Casting Couch Slaughter. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. You don't really need to know anything else about me, do you? That's it. I can go now.
Oh, okay. Well, nice to see you again, Pete.
I'm a busy man. I've got stuff to do.
Hotline to Hollywood and all that.
Yeah. So as I said, I started the website. You came along, and then we went on there. And then we started other things and started the podcast. And now doing movies as well, as well as writing short stories at the same time, because I'm not busy enough.
Good Lord.
And yeah, so Stephen will be your permanent host from now on, and Sarah, hello Sarah.
Hello.
Will be his co-host. So expect a lot of zombie episodes of this podcast.
Yes, as many as possible. Any chance to mention a zombie, it will be done.
Okay, well, I shall pass on this baton for the podcast, Stephen. Here you go. Hold on to this. That's not the baton. Take your hand off that.
So shiny. What is that? Oh, sorry.
So, enjoy, folks. I'm going to go now because I've got things to do, but I will be listening in later on. So, behave yourselves.
Oh.
Thank you, Pete.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Pete.
Bye-bye.
You put the phone down first. Love you. Oh.
He's gone. He's gone already.
Stay in touch.
That's it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Welcome to the show. Pete's gone.
Well, I think you find I'm still here, so that doesn't work.
No one expects the Pete to arrive like that.
Okay, now I'm going to go. Okay, bye.
That wasn't at all sinister. So yes, no longer the weird supply teacher. Hello everyone. So this is the 12th episode of the Horror Screams Video Vault podcast, I believe. So we've been around for about a year now. And today we're joined by, as we've already discovered, by Sarah. Hi Sarah.
Hi again, I'm here.
How are you doing?
Yes, good, thank you. Looking forward to this episode.
Wonderful. Yes, we have a Stephen King special with a big focus on The Shining and then a general rumble around Stephen King in cinema and perhaps slightly beyond as well. And for this, as well as Sarah, we're joined by this week's special guest, which is Matt Blissett. Hi, Matt.
Hi, everyone.
How's it going, Matt?
Good, thank you. Yeah, very good.
Wonderful. Matt is a writer, a huge fan of Stephen King and the author of books such as Laughing Boy, and I'm sure we'll check in on Matt in just a moment to find out a bit more. But yeah, good to have you both. So what we'll do before we launch into The Shining is check up, as we always do, on what we've been up to since the last episode a month ago. So what have you been doing? Let's go to you, Sarah. What have you been up to? What have you been watching?
Recently watching, at the end of the last podcast, I believe, it was very, very close to Fright Fest. And we both had a few Fright Fest movies that we were going to be watching. So I did sit down and check out a couple of them. Shall we mention them?
Cool, yeah. This was the digital-only version of the usual August bank holiday weekend Fright Fest in London, which obviously didn't take place, but it did on the old interwebs.
And I think they did really well with doing that. I think it made the films a lot more accessible to more people. And I certainly enjoyed what I watched. I did only watch a couple of them, but the opening movie that they showed was Sky Sharks, which I've been looking forward to this for years. I heard about it being made probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and every year since then I've been like, is it coming out? Is it coming out? Is it coming out? And they finally brought it out as the opening movie for Fright Fest, and it was absolutely hilarious, wasn't it, Stephen?
It was actually really funny. A lot of people were very sniffy about it, probably before and after and during the movie. And I get that. And I get that maybe Sky Sharks has the misfortune of taking so long to make that it comes after, Sharknado 5 and all those other movies. But it was enough. I think it was fun enough. It was probably too long. It sags a bit in the middle, but there's a couple of really good show-stopping set pieces where I had a big grin on my face and I thought, okay, this is what I signed up for when I watched Sky Sharks. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't too au fait with the people that were on the message board saying this has got far too much gratuitous nudity and it's really silly. Well, yeah, that's the whole point, really.
Yeah, exactly. Why would you think it was going to be anything other than that?
I think the clue is in the title, isn't it?
Exactly.
Sky Sharks.
Yeah. It was gruesome, it was brutal, and pretty shocking in places. It was really good.
Yeah, I quite liked that, actually. It didn't hold back on the gore, did it? Like the you describe it. There's two great set pieces, I believe, from memory. What were your highlights of Sky Sharks?
I would definitely say the very first opening scene on the plane. They had two major plane scenes, and they were both epic, really, weren't they? The little kid with his, or her, was it her? It might have been her, with her toy shark in the window, and then literally, you just see a shark flying towards, and the plane just gets annihilated. But they had a great tribute to kind of Ghost Ship with the harpoon going through the plane and literally slicing everyone. That was great.
Yeah, the start of Ghost Ship is one of the great set pieces of recent-ish horror, even though the movie Ghost Ship isn't particularly great, but the first 5 minutes are awesome.
Yeah.
Massacre on board. How do you top that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why they then decided to use that same kind of trick further on in the movie, rather than just go, we're just going to put this first. They're going to make people wait, and then when it happens, you're like, oh yes, awesome. Yeah, it was a really good one. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a lot of fun, and I really want to see it again. So I hope it comes out soon.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? I guess they've been tinkering with it for a while, and various things have happened. I think funding fell out at one stage. I'm not entirely sure.
Yes, and I suppose they did kind of let themselves down a little bit because they put Tony Todd really high up on the bill, and you're thinking, oh wow, yeah, Tony Todd. But then, as usual, he literally just had a tiny, tiny little part.
Yeah, that's a real shame.
Common, though, isn't it?
They do that quite a lot, and you kind of think, I fall for it every time, basically.
Yeah.
Tony Todd should have major roles in almost anything, really. Did either of you see, I think we may have had this chat before, did either of you see Tony Todd in the Bernard Rose version of Frankenstein a few years ago?
No, I didn't.
No, I haven't, I'm afraid, either. That's one to put on my list.
It's really good.
My homework.
Yeah, both of you. I think I've got a feeling it's on Prime. It may not be, but I've got a weird feeling. As far as I remember, it's got Danny Huston, I think it's got Carrie-Anne Moss, and it's got Tony Todd as the modern-day version of the blind man that's in some of the old Frankenstein movies and famously spoofed in Young Frankenstein. And it's really touching. He plays a kind of blind blues magician, a blues musician, not a magician, obviously, that'd be crazy. And he brings such pathos to the role, and you watch it and you think, oh, I wish Tony Todd, as fun as the cameos are, I wish Tony Todd got more roles like this. But yeah, there's another recommend for you. And what else did you watch at Fright Fest, Sarah?
I watched the Evil Dead documentary Hail to the Deadites. And that was so sweet. It was basically, it's kind of a fan, it shows a lot of fan-made films, doesn't it, of the Evil Dead. It doesn't have an awful lot of actual Evil Dead stuff in it, but it's basically just about the fans and the things that people have made, the amazing props and the awesome merchandise people have been able to afford over all the years. It's just vast and made me incredibly jealous, I have to admit. But it was really, really sweet. A couple of bits about it did annoy me, but that's only just because people annoy me quite a lot.
What about the guy that marries those two guys, those two people, the Evil Dead fan?
That's the bit that just made me cringe. I was just like, oh, why would you ruin something like that? It was, what was his name? Sullivan? Tom Sullivan. Tom Sullivan. Yeah. He's a really, really lovely guy. And yes, this couple come in and the guy proposes to his girlfriend and he helps set it all up and gives him props and stuff. And then you find out at the end of the movie, they got married and then about a year later they were divorced. And you're like, well that was pointless then.
Yeah.
That was annoying. But a lot of the other people in there are just crazy, great and just really into the movies, crazy into the movies. And there's some really good cosplay in there as well. And Bruce was lovely in it, as always. Of course he would be.
Yeah.
He makes an appearance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really sweet.
It was affectionate and it was nice. Yeah, absolutely. And well worth seeing it. It ties in nicely. If you enjoyed the Evil Dead episode that we did last time, Hail to the Deadites, it's a good watch. I'm sure it'll come out sometime soon. Anything else you've been having a gander at in the interim?
Oh, other than that, I did check out #Alive actually on Netflix. The Korean zombie movie that a lot of people are talking about. So you've got Peninsula that a lot of people are talking about, and then you have #Alive, or is it just Alive? I'm not sure. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very well done, but it's nothing new to the zombie genre. It's very much along the lines of The Night Eats the World, of a guy getting stuck in a flat, basically, during a zombie apocalypse. But there's some comic bits, and the zombies, of course, are really well done because it's Korean, and I really love Korean zombies. It's definitely one to check out. A lot of people they have a lot of love for it, so I'm not going to go against them. I thought it was really good too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Are you a fan of Train to Busan, Matt?
Oh God, it's amazing.
Fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, I watched that at Christmas actually for the first time, and just completely blown away by the pacing and the energy of it. And it was interesting because I listened to your zombie movie podcast, zombie movie episode as well, and some of the things that you talked about there. One of the things that I like about Asian cinema is that I tend to go in not knowing what to expect in a way that I do with Western cinema.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Like they're not like it seems to be, and I'm not. It was a Korean thriller I particularly like called. I think it's called I Saw the Devil.
Oh, that's incredible! Yeah,
the one with the serial killer and the Secret Service agent after him.
Yeah, Jesus, that keeps going and going. Yeah, that's spectacular.
That film's absolutely incredible, and Korean cinema is something I'm very, very much into, and it's nice to see that there's a lot more of it on Netflix now as well. So
absolutely, yeah. That is the thing with #Alive, though. You're kind of hoping that it will, go crazy and take a random twist, and they'll push things like they do. But unfortunately, it doesn't really quite do that. It's fairly tame in that respect for a Korean movie, really.
Well, the premise to it sounds like. Have you read World War Z?
Of course.
The section with the otaku where he has to break out the apartment building kind of got that vibe to it from Hundreds.
Yeah, I didn't really think of that, but yeah, it could be based around that kind of idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to Peninsula. Peninsula is opening the Real Live Fright Fest event in October, isn't it? And that has got a lot to live up to, but that's obviously coming up. It is a grand time. And yeah, I Saw the Devil is extraordinary. Like at the time, I suppose, where a lot of American films were trying to recreate Seven and movies like that, I Saw the Devil came along and it's on a whole different level. Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually forgotten who directed it, but the director of that is Matt. No, it's gone. May come back. If only we had something that we could access easily and find out who the director of I Saw the Devil was.
Yeah, I feel like we're all doing that now.
And it's written by Park Hon-jing.
You need to watch it. Say, have you seen it?
No, I don't know this one, but I'm adding that to the list as well because, like you say, you can't help not like those kind of things. They do just seem to take it just to another level. You just think that can't happen. You're like, yeah, they went there, they did that.
Yeah. Yeah, for the last kind of 20 years or so, stuff like Park Chan-wook, his movies, and around the time Old Boy came out, or rather after Old Boy, we noticed that every year at Fright Fest and other festivals, there would always be a standout South Korean film that just blew everything else out of the water, including kind of belated entries into the post-J-horror supernatural kind of field as well. That's cool. Anything else you've been seeing of late then, Sarah?
Other than that, I am all over season 2 of The Boys on Amazon Prime, like an excited puppy. I absolutely.
Have you seen the most recent episode, Sarah?
Yes, don't you worry.
Yeah, that was just. Have you read the comic?
No, I don't. That's like, it just appeared, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, you might want to check it out." So I did, and I was just like, "Oh my god, this is amazing."
The comic actually goes even further than the TV show does.
Oh wow.
Um,
Oh.
yeah, seriously. Some of like the more outlandish stuff actually sort of comes straight from the comic book and is even a little bit tamer than the comic.
That I do find that kind of hard to believe. There was just one moment, I think it was in the second episode of season 2. Well, I was sitting watching it on my tablet, so I had my headphones on. My other half was watching the telly. I was sat next to him. I literally just, something like just totally crazy happened. I jumped back in my seat and like involuntarily shouted, "Fuck off!"
It involves the deep.
No, it was the bit with the was it the CIA woman when they're meeting her out by the car?
Yeah. That was that. There's at least a moment like that, I think, in every episode.
Yeah, absolutely. There really is. And I love Anthony Starr, who plays Homelander. Did you ever watch Banshee?
I loved Banshee.
Yes. He was brilliant in that. He's just fantastic at playing characters like that. I mean, because, Sheriff Hood in Banshee wasn't quite as mental as Homelander, but he just has that kind of level between him of you really like him, but he's an absolute dick, really, or his characters aren't they?
Yeah.
But you get to understand why he's the way he is, but you're still like, oh my god, he's nuts.
He's a fascinating interpretation of the whole. He kind of relates in a way to one of the interesting things with Garth Ennis, who wrote The Boys, the comic, is he absolutely hates superheroes.
But, you can tell.
Yeah, but he's very, very good at writing them. So he did an issue of a comic book called Hitman for DC. Which was where, and the main character, Tommy Monaghan, is just like a Bronx Irish scumbag who's got X-ray vision and he kills for money. Well, there was one issue that was just him and Superman, the DC Superman, and it was the most sincere, warm, heartfelt piece of writing, one of them in a comic book. And it was just one of those things where you're reading it and you're like, clearly he understands where the affection for it comes from, but he's part of those British-Irish school of writers who came from 2000 AD and don't have the romantic attachment to superheroes that a lot of traditional American writers have. And that really does come across quite explicitly in The Boys, in terms of the fact that, you know, the only sort of real hero, if you think about it, is Starlight, who's essentially a double agent.
Yeah, which is really good because she's characterised as the kind of airhead Barbie doll as well, isn't she? But then you've also got Huey and Billy Butcher as well.
Yeah,
As far as I'm concerned, he's the hero.
He's fantastic. I mean, Carl Urban's inspired casting for him, because you want a handsome leading man to sort of kind of carry you into the more kind of outlandish elements. So, you know, you're thinking that I was Carl Urban and, you know him from sort of other genre pictures. I mean, the guy's basically like genre royalty, isn't he? He's played Judge Dredd, he's been in Lord of the Rings, you know, Star Trek, and he does a fantastic job. And this season as well, is he's had a lot more emotional weight to carry. Without spoiling it for anyone who's not seen it yet, things obviously progress for him personally. But yeah, it's a fantastic show.
Yeah, and he gets to throw the C word around like it's
punctuation.
I don't know, just yeah. Yeah, it's a great show. You need to check it out, Stephen.
Yeah, it's next on my list, actually. I've just finished one of the 2 shows I'm watching. I'm really behind on TV shows, but The Boys is going to be on my list from this week, I think. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think I had the message that a message from you around the time that you spun off your sofa saying "fuck off" during the recent episode of whatever it was, which obviously I don't know, but I'm looking forward to it. I am behind. I have finally finished Mindhunter, which probably a lot of listeners have enjoyed, which I think is really impressive. I watched the 2nd season of that, which is this very understated but chilling and also sometimes very funny insight into the early days of studying and talking to serial killers as opposed to just locking them away and hoping for the best. And it's very bold, actually. It has Anatole from Fringe, who is always excellent. It has a bunch of leading characters it's not afraid to make pretty unsympathetic, and yet you kind of root for them at the same time. And it does have, in this second season, a memorable portrait of Charles Manson. Did you check out the second season, Matt?
I haven't yet. However, I have read the books that it's based on, which is
Cool.
his sort of history of how they did it. And one of the bits that, and it's rare sometimes, it's not that rare with me that I'll have a moment reading a book where I'll just go, oh my God, and like, not quite drop it, but equivalent of, they went in, when they started going in and talking to the serial murderers in prison, as you mentioned, one of the things he sat down and said, he said, because they tried all of these different things of like psychological tests and stuff, and none of them worked. And Douglas went in, sat down with Speck, the one who killed that room full of killed that boarding house of nurses, and said, who the fuck are you to take away 8 pieces of arse from the rest of us? And no one had spoken to him in that tone before, and immediately he started just opening up about his process and everything. And the nice thing was, it was there in the book. Doesn't the second season deal with the Atlanta child murders as well?
Yeah, the Atlanta child murders is the main story. It touches on the son of Sam. There's a running thing about BTK. Charles Manson and Ed Kemper are kind of fleetingly in it, but the main through line is the Atlanta child murders, which I didn't know much about, actually, that case.
No, and that's the main thing of the story, isn't it? Is that and the actual incident was that because it was black children being killed, there wasn't the particular interest from law enforcement.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Because the show is really low key, which is part of its great skill, but it's very quietly enraged by the fact that these kids were dying in large numbers, and no one really gave much of a toss. It's really powerful, and the outcome, it leaves you again very understated, but you're kind of left kind of bereft. Really, it's a somber show with humour, but by the end of the season, like with season 1, you're still blown away by what's happened. Yeah, Mindhunter's great. A lot of episodes directed by Carl Franklin, who I always wondered what happened to him after a couple of great movies like One False Move in the 90s. And David Fincher directed a few as well, as he did the first season.
Well, Fincher was what got me into, because I'll watch anything Fincher does. And I think there's 2 directors who I wish would do straight up horror movies. Him, although you could argue Seven's a horror movie.
Yeah, sure.
And Tarantino.
Yeah.
Which I think he's talked about doing before he retires, I believe. So.
Yeah, that would be tremendous. I always wish the same. I remember there was a weird point in the 90s when Fangoria was reporting that Tarantino and Roger Avery were writing Halloween 6 or 7, whatever the number they were up to at that point. What, really? Because they were the franchise was owned by Miramax at the time. And Death Proof I always quite liked. It's a bit throwaway, but I quite like a lot about Death Proof and the Grindhouse concept as a whole. But yeah, if he could do a pure, intense horror movie, that would be quite something. Very cool. And, fair enough. What have you been watching, Matt, in the last short time?
Hereditary and Midsummer.
Oh, you watched both of them? Which one did you watch first?
Hereditary and then Midsummer.
Oh, okay. What did you think?
I thought they were absolutely incredible. And the reason being, one of the things that I've always liked and why I've always defended horror to naysayers is I read voraciously. So I read everything from like literature to... I'm a genre boy at heart, but I just read everything. And one of the things that I found, despite the kind of weight of critical acclaim Asta has, is that the horror is almost like a spoonful of sugar to sweeten the medicine. Hereditary is an absolutely wonderful examination about grief. And when the occult elements come in, you could almost watch it disregarding them and still have an incredibly intense, almost upsetting movie. And Midsummer is and conversely, I love the fact that he went from one extreme to the other. So Hereditary is very sepia, amber. A lot of it is in the dark and the gloom, whereas the kind of constant harsh brightness of Midsummer is horrific in a different sense because it doesn't spare you anything. And I loved it. Midsummer in particular was, it gave me a hell of a lot to think about after the fact. Because it's on one level, it's play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But it's also an examination of, again, grief, which is, I think, maybe a common thing with Asta, but also the literal examination of a dysfunctional relationship. And I thought it was fantastic. What else? Castlevania on Netflix. I've started. I'm now about to start season 3 of that, which I really, really enjoy. I enjoyed the first 2 seasons immensely. It's, despite its origins as a Konami video game, a classic video game, it's very, very clever, well-structured kind of Western anime. And, yeah, fantastic. So that, Ozark, and one of the things I'm really into with horror-wise at the moment is a film called The Invitation.
Oh, that's the Karen Kusama movie,
yes.
Yeah? Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I watched that again recently, and that's a film I've seen more than a few times because I can literally just instantly get into it. Destroyer as well I've seen recently, and I thought that was...
I haven't seen Destroyer, but I need to see
great.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's some talent. The Invitation is a must-watch as well. I'd forgotten it was on Netflix, actually.
Yeah.
That's a standout film.
I mean, I'm hoping Girl Fight's on there as well, because that was her first film, and that's Michelle Rodriguez in the title role of that, and that was one of those films where she's done well for herself since, clearly, but she's kind of like in action franchises now. But Girl Fight, she gives such a good performance, and it's almost a shame that I don't know whether she's not being offered those roles, but she does a fantastic job in that. And a massive fan of hers. So, yeah, Ari Aster, Castlevania. What was the other one I picked up the other day? Because I remembered listening from before. Session 9.
Ah, Session 9.
Yeah.
What did you think? That's one of my favourite horror movies of the last 20 years.
That was amazing. Genuinely was just
incredible.
Yeah. Because it's a great cast. It's one of the things I've always liked in supernatural fiction, and it was one of the things for me with Laughing Boy of that balancing act of you're never quite sure if it's supernatural or not.
Yeah. And
I like that ambiguity in it, and then more often than not it reveals it's one way or the other. But yeah, Session 9 was great. A Quiet Place I've seen recently as well.
Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah.
Loved that. Amazing that was one of his first sort of films, directorially speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, that's terrific.
I haven't seen the second one yet. Does he direct that as well?
I think he did, actually.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm pretty sure he did. It's still, I don't think it has a release date yet.
I was going to say, that was supposed to come out just before the whole pandemic hit, didn't it?
Yeah.
But it never actually
did.
They
cancelled the premiere.
Oh, it now says it's expected April 2021.
Oh, not too long to wait then?
No, maybe.
That's a real shame.
Which was because my son, Harley, hi Harley, by the way, because he said he's going to be listening to this when it comes out on Friday.
Cool.
He keeps me current on horror movies, on stuff that I miss. And he's been pressing on me for ages to watch the David Gordon Green Halloween.
Oh, okay, cool.
And I absolutely loved it, just in terms of... Because I like... The Rob Zombie one, I felt was a little bit too much of a Rob Zombie film.
It's very Rob Zombie.
Yeah. Whereas I thought David Gordon Green went back and captured what Carpenter did with the premise, but then also brought it forward. So, for instance, Laurie's storyline and Jamie Lee Curtis's portrayal of what somebody with PTSD would actually behave like and how the rest of their life would be shaped by that incident. So, like, I'm always looking for... I love great special effects. I love those, like you described, Sarah, those drop something out of your hands moments of shock.
Yeah.
I'm also always looking for, like, the good underpinnings psychologically. Particularly in terms of, from a writing point of view, what the structure is. And, you know, I'm a bit of a magpie in terms of, as a writer, I look at different things and how they achieve those effects. And particularly with the David Gordon Green Manhunter, Halloween, there was there was so many little moments that I was just like really, really impressed with how they put that together.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? I really enjoyed that. I actually quite like the Rob Zombie Halloweens, but of course they are divisive, partly because they are such Rob Zombie films. Yeah. So that's pretty cool that the franchise let him do his Rob Zombie thing, which is in contrast, I think, to a lot of the workman-like jobs done by so many of the sequels. But for a Halloween film, this is a better Halloween film for the franchise. And it's great to have her back, especially after she was unceremoniously beheaded in the really, really dreadful Halloween Resurrection, which is the Busta Rhymes one. Which was a low point. And she's great. Watching her in anything, I think, is worth the ticket, really. Again, a shame the sequel's been moved. I think the sequel's been moved to next Halloween, hasn't it? As far as I know.
Yeah, and then they're doing the last one.
Yeah.
Back to back, they filmed them back to back.
Yeah, absolutely. Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends?
Yeah, something like that.
Which I think will be potentially something really special. She's just superb in it. And I think the movie was really well cast. It's actually co-written by, what's the guy's name, the comedian guy? Danny McBride.
Yes.
Which is interesting. And that it does shine through at certain moments. There's certain moments of comedic relief where you think, oh, okay, that's a bit of his influence there. Although I gather he's a massive horror fan, so that's pretty cool.
That's the whole thing. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's. I think you've got to approach horror sometimes with sincerity.
Yeah.
But particularly with something like Halloween, where it's a well-established franchise. We all know there's films in that franchise that aren't the greatest, but when you're aware of how much love there is for the character and the setting and the expectations of it, I think it's far more difficult to go in and pay proper homage to that when so often what you find is people do deconstructions.
Yeah,
I find deconstruction to be really lazy in terms of when they deconstruct a film, and I don't equate something like Scream with that because Scream plays with the tropes, but it also acknowledges, hey, we know you really like this and we're going to give that to you.
Yeah.
Also, we're going to allow you that little moment of irony where you can kind of have a wink and a nod and still enjoy it. It's a wonderful part of the genre for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is hit and miss, isn't it? Scream nailed it. Scream wasn't afraid to be brutal and frightening when it needed to be, but it had that running through it. And the lesser movies that followed Scream were just kind of flippant and disposable. But yeah, Halloween does a really fine job. Okay, well, just before we go on to the Shinning, which is today's main feature, a couple of shout-outs actually for movies I watched at Fright Fest. I'll keep it really brief. They were both on the last two nights of the festival, and they're both really small movies that may well get lost in the shuffle, although I suppose if they get picked up by Netflix or one of the major streaming services, they may well be discovered. One was called A Ghost Waits, which unfortunately is one of those films where if you describe it, you can almost hear people's eyes rolling, because it does sound like a particularly lame combination of Beetlejuice and the lovely... There was a film a couple of years ago by David Lowery called A Ghost Story, which I thought was beautiful. And this sounds like a kind of hybrid of both, because the main character is a character I always wondered if they existed. Like when a haunted house happens and the family flees in terror, I always kind of wondered, well, who clears that up then? Who gets rid of their stuff? And the main character in A Ghost Waits is that guy. He's the guy that goes in. A family has fled this haunted house in terror, leaving all their belongings. And while he waits for the removal vans, his job is to clean the house up, and he befriends a ghost. The ghost, in fact, that drove them out. The difference being he's not at all afraid of her, and actually he's so lonely and lost at sea in life that he falls in love with her, and it's mutual. And she's quite lovely. She's 200 years old. She's called Muriel, and as you can hear, it sounds a bit rubbish, but actually it's so beautifully made. It's in black and white. It's shot in 1.33 aspect ratio, and it's just a lovely film. It ends in a particular fashion which is really risky, and it could, and I think has, totally throw people off. But for me, I thought it was just a beautiful ending. It's very quiet, it's very witty, but I really like Ghost Waits. It's a debut film for the filmmaker, and I think it had a generally good reception at Fright Fest, but as I said, it's not necessarily for everyone. And if you read the 3-line description on Netflix, you'll be going, no thanks, that's okay, I'll pass on that one.
It sounds really sweet. Hopefully Shudder will pick it up. They're good at picking up stuff like that. I hope
so. Yeah, Shudder's really hitting out of the park at the moment. Yeah, I think so. I think if anyone will, it will be them. And it plays with haunted house tropes really well, but at the heart of it is these two really quite lovable characters, and the inconvenience of her being dead is the one barrier between them actually finding someone for once that actually they can be with and be happy with. It's really quite lovely, but you have to watch it to appreciate it, obviously. The final one was the closing film at Fright Fest, and it's The Swerve. Also a feature debut. And this has an actress who I remembered. She's in a kind of small but really important role in Buffy. I think she was in 2 episodes, one of which was Conversations with Dead People. And she's called Azura Sky. And she plays this terribly, terribly downtrodden and forgotten and ignored housewife. Family are awful. Husband is cheating on her. Their sons are bastards. They're sweary bastards. And the title refers to an incident where she was almost run off the road by some lecherous drunken guys, and she actually swerved and caused them to have a horrible fatal accident. So she's haunted by this. However, her state of mind is such that we're not entirely sure whether it really happened. We just know that she's falling apart because she's lonely and miserable. And it has it reminded me of things like, at times, Requiem for a Dream, in terms of her mental breakdown, Repulsion, the Polanski film, a recent film called Swallow. It reminded me of those. And it's incredibly empathetic to this leading character. And it's entirely grim and hopeless. And at the end, you're totally spent. But it's so well acted, and it's so intense, and strangely beautiful as well. So yeah, The Swerve and A Ghost Waits. Horror films, not by the traditional definition, but certainly kind of nibbling around the edges of the genre and using some of genre tropes. Do check those out. And Sarah said quite rightly, if anybody picks those 2 up, it will probably be Shudder.
Yeah. I remember seeing the trailer for The Swerve I think that was when I was waiting for Hail to the Deadites to start. And I wanted to message you about it, but I couldn't figure out what it was actually called because the writing's so swirly, you can't actually read what it says. But I've literally just looked it up, and I was just, as you were talking about it, I was like, oh my God, I saw the trailer for it. It looked amazing. It going back to Hereditary, it kind of reminded me a bit of that as well, with the way the mother was in that. She looks,
yes.
In the trailer, she's portrayed in that kind of a way. And that does look fantastic.
And yeah, absolutely. And as Matt suggested, talking about Hereditary, the same with Hereditary, really. Some of the most horrifying moments in The Swerve are all too believable and relatable scenes around the family dinner table that make you squirm and think, oh, Jesus. And the actual horror in it is not necessarily a relief, but in this case, it actually kind of is, because the misery of her domestic existence is such that you almost will something to end it, even if it ends it in the most horrifying fashion. So, yeah, I think it's that old thing of horror directors or directors that are not really horror directors, but they're making a film that accidentally falls into the horror genre, but works as a drama in its own right. So
yeah, I was going to say, they don't have it labelled as horror. It's literally just down as a drama. But, stuff like that, like you say, can be harrowing in itself.
Yeah, entirely. I really wish people... Well, I think they will. I think it will be one of those movies that gets discovered. But in a kind of world where movies like The Swerve are seen by the Oscar people, this would be a shoo-in for Best Actress because she's so great. But of course, they won't be watching The Swerve necessarily.
Damn it.
So, on to Happier Times, which is The Shining, which is this month's Retro Rewind. We don't always do obscure choices for Retro Rewind, although we have done the Corpse Grinders, which I think, ticked a few obscure boxes for a couple of months. Yes. And The Shining is a well-loved film, although what's interesting, I think, is to reflect on the fact that it wasn't always. It came out in 1980, the summer of 1980, the same weekend as Empire Strikes Back. Unbelievable weekend that would have been. So, and however, it wasn't well loved. I mean, I was looking around and I found some quotes from reviews at the time, and what you realise is it was actually pretty much hated. So here's an example. Variety: the crazier Nicholson gets, the more idiotic he looks. Shelley Duvall transforms the warm, sympathetic wife of the book into a simpering, semi-retarded hysteric.
Really?
Roger Ebert was famously dismissive at the time, although he gave it a 4-star review in 1996 as a kind of, I may have been wrong. Pauline Kael said, we're not frightened because Kubrick's absorption in film technology distances us, which was a common thing of people picking up on the fact that Kubrick's films are typically pretty chilly. And Derek Malcolm said, well, Derek Malcolm's quite sniffy in a way that I think says a lot about critics' attitude about horror in the time. His phrase was, the genre within the film is cast... the genre within the film... Actually, I'll try that again. The genre within which the film is cast exerts too great a price. So his view was that, here's this interesting Kubrick film that's been tarnished by what he saw as the horror elements, cheapening it. So the film was fairly dismissed. Kubrick tinkered around with it. There are 3 different cuts of the film, 2 of which have been on wide release either in America or in the UK. A shorter version, a 144-minute version, which is now out on Blu-ray over here, and a slightly longer one, which, as far as I could tell, didn't really get past the original premiere, which has got a couple of extra scenes in it. But in truth, he saw all 3 of those as director's cuts. He oversaw, as you'd expect, a man of his stature. He ensured that he put his stamp of approval on it, even in its abbreviated form. The book was Stephen King's 3rd published novel, came out in 1977, very autobiographical in terms of portraying one man's struggle with alcoholism, a couple of shady things that have happened in his past, one of which involved him losing his teaching job. And Stephen King was quite famously not very happy with how it was translated into a Kubrick film, starting, I think, with the casting of Jack Nicholson in a role that he figured should belong to an everyman, like Christopher Reeve or John Voight, I think, was another guy that he had in mind for a potential film version. But nowadays, you say The Shining to people, and even if they haven't seen it, they'll know some of the key iconic moments.
Yeah.
And it tends to figure in all those shows, top 10 scariest movies or top 10 all-time great horror movies. Do you remember, you two, like the first time you watched The Shining, or your first impressions of it as a movie?
I was... One of the things, because I'd read the book before I'd seen it, and one of the interesting things with Kubrick and a source of King's criticism of the book, of the film, was Kubrick saw it archetypally. So I think there's a quote from him. He says that one of the things that horror stories can do is show us the archetypes of the unconscious. We can see the dark side without having to confront it directly. Now, obviously, King understands that, but the book directly confronts the dark side. Obviously there's The Shining itself, there's the elements of the Overlook, but I do remember being absolutely unnerved by the film. Particularly, I find it interesting that they sort of described Shelley Duvall as being simpering. Like, she's clearly with it being a metaphor for King's drug and alcohol issues.
Yeah,
and I felt that her performance was pretty much perfect in terms of the pressure of isolation. It's interesting, and it's almost like a non-supernatural movie.
Sure.
And look, and I've watched it again a couple of months ago, and it's beautifully done. Like it was Kubrick's way to kind of bridge between his interests in technical innovation, because obviously I think it was one of the first films ever to use Steadicam, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's astonishing. Yeah, absolutely. It's 2 years after Halloween, but this was the one that really set the bar for it, wasn't it?
And and obviously with the attention to detail he built in terms of the interior sets, because they were Elstree for the, and then I think they went to Yosemite National Park. I think if I went
yes,
yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things is the stories about the making of the film. Particularly because Kubrick is in that tradition of directors, much like James Cameron. They really do make everyone on set work very, very hard. To the point, particularly with The Shining, where I think Duvall actually said that she was under so much stress, I think, that her hair began to fall out.
Yeah.
And, there were constant script changes, sometimes just minutes before they actually filmed. I think they did a bar scene in there.
Mm-hmm.
They rehearsed it for 6 weeks, and on the shoot day, they filmed from 9 a.m. till 10:30 a.m. And there was an interview with Joe Turkel, and he said, once they finished at 10:30, he said he could wring his clothes through with the perspiration.
Yeah, there's astonishing tales, isn't it? There's the kitchen scene with Halloran and Danny. 88 takes is what is recorded in the great. There's a great documentary, The Making of The Shining, by Vivian Kubrick, which is on most of the DVD releases, which is quite harrowing in itself because it does display how far Shelley was pushed, in particular Shelley, and she is really great in the film. It's an astonishing, tough role.
Interestingly enough, one of the things I've always liked as well is when you learn about alternative potential casting choices. So, interestingly enough, Robert De Niro, I think, was up for it. And also, I believe, Robin Williams.
What, for Jack?
Yeah. And Harrison Ford.
Oh, no, I can't see any of them. Even, like Stephen said, Christopher Reeve, because I couldn't see him as Jack Torrance at all. I suppose it's just because it's just Nicholson was what he was. Yeah, exactly. You see him and you're like, yeah, that's definitely him. Okay, he might have been a little bit too quirky, but when it comes to going nuts and losing it, you need someone like him to do it because he just makes you believe it.
And also as well, just in terms of those questions you kind of ask yourself if you're really into a film is, why is she with him? Well, Jack Nicholson is, has this incredibly, and particularly at that time as well, he had this raw masculine charisma. So you kind of think to yourself, well, why does she stick with someone who's clearly a troubled alcoholic? And you kind of want that thing of like, yeah, he's a troubled alcoholic, but also he's got that Jack Nicholson charm.
Yeah.
So you imagine someone who's talked himself out of as many situations as he gets himself into. To me, the casting makes it plausible. And I'm much like you, Sarah. I can't imagine anybody else in the role.
No.
Although they did the mini-series, didn't they?
Oh, yeah, I didn't watch that.
It's it's not great.
No.
It's interesting, but it's... It tries to address the balance, doesn't it? Because it casts the more kind of ordinary Steven Weber as the Jack Torrance character. And it proves the reason why the topiary animals should never have been included in any version of the film or the adaptation, because it does look ridiculous, and it works in the book in the context of the book. And Kubrick was right to leave it out. But yeah, Steven Weber going around with a croquet mallet, which again is truer to the book. It just doesn't cut it, unfortunately. No. But maybe that's because we know this film so well. Who knows? It hasn't.
For me, with The Shining, I watched the movie before I read the book, and I think I watched it. I was pretty young, before I was a teenager. I think I watched it, so I only kind of concentrated and picked on a few things that really stuck in my mind, because a lot of it, because I hadn't read the book, I didn't really understand. I didn't really understand the whole shining thing and Tony with the weird finger and stuff like that. I didn't really get that, but you kind of latch on to the feel of it, you know, the scenery, the music. The music is, and incidentals and stuff, still just chills me out. We were talking, me and my other half watched it recently for this so I could take some notes, and we were trying to figure out exactly what they kind of used to make some of the sounds and stuff. And you think they probably just put like a pen or something in a glass and knocked it together, and it just makes that weird resonating, chilling sound that just goes straight through you. And it works so well in the movie. So I definitely picked up on that even when I was quite young. And then obviously the little girls kind of freaked me out. But didn't everybody want to ride through a hotel, an empty hotel on a little plastic scooter? I still want to do that. I really want to do that. It looks like so much fun.
And the sound as he goes over the carpets is haunting as anything.
Yeah, it is. It's great. And he is really creepy. I mean, we could talk about Jack Nicholson, you know, being crazy, but the kid he was so good, wasn't he?
He's amazing. Yeah,
I'm not a massive
so
kid fan. Yeah, he was so creepy. And the whole bit when, I think when Jack goes into room 237 and meets the woman in the bath and like Danny's having some kind of episode, that is so creepy.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting, isn't it? Because it is a film over the years that people either find scary or they don't. There's not much middle ground with The Shining. Even people that love it don't always think it's a scary film. It's not necessarily trying that hard to be a scary film. So much of it is in brightly lit rooms. The hotel itself is far from creepy. The hotel isn't creepy at all.
The maze is quite creepy.
The maze, the maze is great. There's that incredible scene where Jack looks down at the model of the maze that then becomes this aerial shot of Wendy and Danny, which always is extraordinary.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a great example of a horror movie made by a director that wasn't really usually working in this genre. There's no jump scares really as such. In fact, some of the quote unquote scares are almost set up to be the opposite of a shock or a scare. But it does have these pockets of horrifying moments, a lot of which are previewed in the first few minutes, like the famous tidal wave of blood and the twins are in really early on as a vision that Danny's having. Yeah,
but then there's the whole woman in the bath and stuff. I mean, for a film made in the 1980s, that was some really good effects for her as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great sequence. Room 237.
It doesn't seem all that dated, apart from the decor and stuff, like the effects wise and stuff. I was like, wow, it still looks really good watching it again now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I suppose, I don't know about you, but I suppose the stuff that scared me back in the day, which would have been Tony, the little boy who lives in my mouth, Red Rum.
He's really creepy.
And the sisters, who I don't think, I always thought of them as twins, but watching it again, I realised that they're referred to as being 8 and 10 years old by the Toro guide. And then you look at them, they're not identical, and they just kind of strike you as twin.
You just think that they are because they're dressed the same, yeah.
Yeah, and the whole twin thing is maybe a psychological thing because there's so much about doubles in the film, including the beautiful woman in 237 that turns into this kind of repulsive green EC Comics hag, and all the scenes with mirrors, which again there's a lot of debate about whether the fact that every time Jack seems to see a ghost, it is at a point where he's looking into a mirror or in front of a reflective surface, whether at the bar or in the bathroom sequence. So that's all very interesting. Because that's the thing, is it a ghost story? Is all of this just him falling apart? Is it just a cabin fever story? These days, a guy in lockdown falling apart and going crazy, which of course all of us are about 3 missed paydays away from ending up the same way. These days, I think that's why the film's scary. I'm no longer freaked out by the twins or by Red Rum. It's the madness of Jack, which of course he pulls off so well. Absolutely superb. But what do you think about the time frame that this takes place in? When I was rewatching it, I noticed how ridiculous the captions become, because the captions are there initially 1 month later. You think, okay, 1 month after the initial setup for Jack's caretaking. Then it goes to Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, and then 8 a.m. None of it, I think that's all part of the madness as well, because the time it could be, are they there for 3 months, or is it just all happening very quickly because he was already on the edge?
The ambiguity, I think, is interesting, and one of the things, and we've sort of touched on it already, is I think the inherent tension between King, who wrote it from a semi-religious, supernatural perspective of, because King's a very moral writer, and obviously Kubrick being very cerebral and intellectual, one of the things I think makes The Shining great is you've obviously got that tension between the source material and Kubrick's aesthetic. And there was an article I read by Laura Miller that touched on this and articulated a feeling I had from it. And there's a lovely quote I found, which was, in King's book, the monster is Jack. In Kubrick's film, the monster is Kubrick. Which I really, really, is a lovely way to describe it. But it's almost like a very technical domestic drama in one sense, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's wonderful about it is that all of the things that can age a film work in The Shining's favour.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I see it as quite a drama because it's not entirely one note. Like Jack's performance, which was slated, as we saw in the reviews at the time, Jack's performance has more going on than just that maniacal character that everybody remembers. There's those quite sad scenes, isn't it? This is a portrait of a guy going through mood swings from being a horribly cruel bully to being really quite sad and confused.
Yeah, when he has his nightmare, when he's asleep on the typewriter, that's quite traumatic, the way he goes through that. You're hearing the noises and stuff that he's making. Kind of makes you feel for him a bit. And he has really awkward kind of relationship with his son, doesn't he? The conversation they have in the bedroom starts off as probably one of the most awkward. It kind of makes you a little bit cringy when you're watching it, because
is that when he tries to he sort of cuddles him and it's affectionate but not quite right?
Yeah, it just feels really weird, like they don't really do that. And he's like, are you enjoying here? And Danny's literally just kind of like staring at the wall, not trying to pay any attention to him whatsoever, and just go, yeah, Dad, I'm fine.
Yeah, he tells him what he thinks he wants to hear, doesn't he? And the bit where Danny comes back from room 237 and he's injured, and the movie cuts to Jack, who doesn't seem to know if he did this or not. That point where you realise he doesn't know anymore what's going on is, I think, quite a sad moment as well as really disturbing. I like the family car trip at the start, which is a stunning sequence of the helicopter shot of this tiny yellow car overwhelmed by the mountain range, and the awkwardness of their talk in the car is great. I love that whole scene. They're talking about cannibalism, and Jack says, "Oh yeah, it's okay. He knows all about it. He watched it on TV." It's just, I like that the small talk is about the Donner Party getting snowbound and eating each other. That's the small talk on the way to the hotel. So I think there's a huge amount of black humour in this, as there is in all of Kubrick's films. Full Metal Jacket and Clockwork Orange were the two big ones that surrounded this. Although he made Barry Lyndon in the middle, which was a movie that wasn't well liked either at the time. But again, is in a wholly different genre. I like the throwaway stuff, the throwaway horror stuff. Like usually a big plot point would be, we found out this is built on an Indian burial ground. It's thrown away in one line. Because it doesn't matter.
No.
It's brilliant. My thing when I was watching this growing up, I always loved the big scenes. There's a few scenes in this which very unusual for a horror movie. It seem to go on for a very long time, or they're dialogue driven. So I always kind of see The Shining in terms of a succession of 3 or 4 amazing, quite long sequences. And my favourite one might be the scene in the gentleman's room with the kind of blinding white and red colours. What about you guys? I mean, is there a standout set piece or two that strikes you for The Shining?
For me, it's got to be just that classic bit with where he's hammering the axe through the door, and she's screaming on the other side of it, and like we live in an age now where with things like TikTok and WorldStar, where you actually get to see these random acts of violence happen in real time, and I felt that scene where he loses, that whole sequence where he loses it, just like it's painful to watch. And you almost kind of like one of the things I like about it. I say it's an exhausting film.
No, it is, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's something I had to have long periods of time between watching. I mean, one of the things for me is I'm always interested in films that people will only ever watch once. And I think the wonderful thing about The Shining for me is that each time I've come back to it, I've been able to appreciate it differently. First of all, in terms of it's one of my favourite writers in a film being made of his, but also coming back to it and appreciating the aesthetics of it in terms of the technical side of it, and the performances. And I'm someone who can separate what was intended for the book with what was intended for the film, and I enjoy them both for very different reasons. But also, I find as I said, the inherent tension between between source material and adaptation to be genuinely fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great climactic sequence. It still has a huge amount of power, doesn't it? And it kind of reinforces the fairy tale stuff that's set up early on, where he becomes the big bad wolf.
Yeah,
and she's great at it. The whole sequence where she's trying to quite lamely but relatably fend him off with the baseball bat, and eventually does manage to whack him around the head. That's a real insight, I think, to his cruelty there, and she's painfully good in that moment. And you do get a sense, I think, maybe there and in other parts of the film, the hell that she went through making the film. But let's not forget, Shelley Duvall was a really good actress back in the 70s. She had a great bunch of performances for Robert Altman in particular, which is where I think I first saw her. But yeah, in the movie year with slasher movies so resplendent in 1980, there were so many sequences with young heroines fending off psychopaths. But this one is the one that I think feels really painful and real and raw. And it goes on for a long time, so it really becomes the movie, like you suggested, Matt. The movie is kind of bullying us in the way that Jack, at his worst, bullies her.
Yeah.
And as you say, it is quite real because, she doesn't do anything super heroic. She's just trying to look out for her kids. And, even when she's trying to get out of the bathroom window and stuff, she sends him out first. She still manages to defeat Jack. She gets away and Danny defeats him as well. In the end, you kind of come out thinking, well, Jack was a bit rubbish, really, wasn't he? Because, it didn't take much for them to lose him. But that is the more realistic thing about it. There's no supernatural powers or anything involved when it comes to them getting away.
No.
Yeah, I love the fact that in these movies, in Friday the 13th, they knock off Mrs. Voorhees' head at the end, and Halloween 2, they burn Michael Myers alive in an exploding hospital. But this one, the killer kind of sadly walks off on his own.
Gets lost in the maze, freezes to death. That's what would happen.
Exactly. He's become he's exhausted and incoherent and just very cold. And that's really, again, a nice element of humanity in a film that is renowned to be quite cold, which I don't think it is entirely. It's obviously cold geographically, but I think there is more human stuff in this than people, critics certainly gave it credit for. But it's often in small moments. Of course, another great sequence, and we can probably touch upon this when we talk about the other King films, but there's a few great sequences in King films and, of course, books. Great writer moments, as in the protagonist is a writer, and the most chilling bit of insanity in this is obviously that awful moment where, and you're right there with her, because she's so empathetic in this film anyway, but Wendy finally has a look at Jack's work. She's been kicked out so many times rudely, it has to be said, and there is this weird kind of type-faced nightmare full of errors and mental layouts of the same line over and over again.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is I don't know if either of you have read any of Joe Hill's stuff.
Yes, I love Joe Hill. Yes, I've read quite a bit, yeah.
Because he does something similar in The Fireman, doesn't he? Where she,
of course,
where she reads his Desolation's Plough.
Yeah,
and it turns out to be this self-aggrandizing piece of utter shit. And so it's quite fascinating to sort of see that idea continue, particularly through his work, and that's something that he's always touched on as well. More so in well, he's done it obviously in like Secret Window, but oh god, what's the King book? Hang on, I'm trying to remember. Because as I was saying to Sarah before we started, there was a point with King where it was, I think, sort of late 90s, early 2000s, where there was a lot of Lizzie's story. That's it.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, I like.
Yeah, Lizzie's story in particular is an entire book about, somebody's literary supernatural legacy. Yeah, and that's one of the ones. I don't know if I've never heard talk of an adaptation of that. I think there's one in development. There usually is with his stuff.
Yeah, there's a few great books, isn't there? Lizzie's Story and Duma Key and Revival. There were a few. Sleeping Beauties, I thought was fantastic. There's a few that I assume will be making their way to either Netflix or whatever it is these days that movies can realistically get funding for. Yeah, absolutely. What do you guys think of in the book? He survives along with obviously Wendy and Danny. But what do you think of the quite detailed fixation on Halloran's plight to get to the hotel in time, with this hilarious bedroom with the two opposite blaxploitation kind of nude black ladies on his walls, which is an interesting insight into his personal life. But he gets there and he's immediately killed. Obviously, in the book, he survives and he's in Doctor's Sleep, which is Mike Flanagan's really quite clever way of somehow being a sequel to a book and a film that had different endings and different formats. But what do you think of that? It always struck me as a bit of a shame. But then his character does, I suppose, become quite irrelevant in the story anyway, after a fashion, after that great intro.
Mm.
It's I feel it speaks to Kubrick's whole approach to the source material, in that in the book, obviously, Halloran serves in the kind of archetypal hero's journey to Danny.
Yeah.
Danny is the hero. Like, he's the mentor, Halloran. And in the book, he exemplifies the kind of Danny's increase in awareness and acceptance of his abilities. Whereas in the film, you always kind of got the sense that Kubrick read the source material and looking for holes to poke in it.
Yeah.
Well, it was kind of like you've spent all this time establishing this character and you just kill him off as soon as he gets there. And that to me he's probably more horrific, and much like you said, Sarah, in terms of the way that the antagonist ultimately dies, is probably more realistic than anything.
Yeah. It's still shocking, isn't it? Because he's a very charismatic actor, and there's some lovely footage of him, actually. I'm not sure if it's in the Vivian Kubrick documentary, but there's some lovely footage of Scatman basically welling up and being so emotional about how happy he is to get this role in, obviously, this massive movie, but a character that ultimately would be also iconic. I always thought it was a bit of a shame, but as you said, it's Kubrick's interpretation of the source material. What about the glimpses of the hotel, like the moment where there's this briefly glimpsed sex act between someone and somebody in an animal suit? What is it, a bunny suit?
Bear suit.
The bear suit,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah, I don't get that. I don't think I've ever got that.
It's great.
I think to me it was a way to visualise the inherent, because the Overlook is basically Hill House Hotel to me.
Oh, Shirley Jackson influence is strong in the book, isn't it?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
And I felt to me it was a way to visualise the corruption and the kind of madness of the Overlook. In the sense of there is something inherently creepy about hotels, because every time you book into a room, you don't know what's been done there.
Sure.
And I felt that those sort of scenes were kind of like a way to show the characters and also us as the viewers a sense of, this place is pretty screwed.
Yeah, sure. And I suppose the debate continues, doesn't it? I mean, is Jack a reincarnation? I mean, is he absorbed into the Overlook at the end?
Yeah, who knows?
Because he's in the photo, isn't he, from 1921?
From the 20s, yeah.
But did nobody notice that in the few months of being in the hotel? So is the photo just now been changed now that he's become the latest one?
Yeah, maybe because he's the only one that sees that gathering, doesn't he, in the bar and stuff.
I always think
The
Yeah.
party.
And he's got The Shining too, right? If The Shining is passed from generation to generation, without knowing it, he has the same power as Danny. Is that the case?
I think so, yeah. And because obviously, referring to Doctor Sleep, Danny's an alcoholic at the start of the book and also the
Yeah.
film. And I think that is one of the nicest things Flanagan did was in terms of massage and the cognitive dissonance between film and source material.
Yeah.
Was how you can look back and say, all right, the alcoholism was clearly a way to repress whatever nascent psychic abilities he had. And I think The Overlook feeds on that. To me,
Yeah.
I always interpret it as that he's, if they'd have seen the photo whilst he was still alive, you wouldn't see him there. And I think that's a way to kind of show the viewer, nothing is wasted in The Overlook, only corrupted.
Mm.
And I think that's a nice visual thing for a nice little thing for us as the viewer, where Kubrick just goes, this is what might have happened. And it's a real gift to have that ambiguity where you can sit there and discuss with people. That's one of my favourite things. One of the things I really miss during this whole lockdown thing is the collective experience of cinema.
Yeah.
And one of my favourite things is to see a film and then, and discuss it with people afterwards. Same with, it's part and parcel of it. So I always interpret it as he physically dies, but his consciousness, soul, whatever you want to call it, is absorbed and feeds the Overlook.
Until the next one comes along.
Yeah.
Until the next fragile,
Well, again, it goes back to the Shirley Jackson influence of these horrible places continue. They're perfect traps.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the character of Grady in the film as well. Again, it's a really long scene, but that's a really great scene, isn't it? It's a movie with so many riches. Absolutely. Have you seen Dr. Sleep, Sarah?
I haven't as yet, no. I do really want to see it, and I'm very much looking forward to the second one as well, which is apparently going to be directed by Sam Raimi.
Wow. Oh, I didn't realise.
I might be wrong on that, as I am many a time, but I had heard that rumour somewhere on the internet, so obviously that's possibly not true. But yes, I need to see Doctor Sleep, because it's who plays Danny?
Oh, it's Ewan McGregor.
That's it. Yeah, I do love Ewan McGregor, so yeah, I do need to see it. And it's weird that he's like, if you're saying like, he starts off as an alcoholic, basically he's just the same as his dad.
Yeah, they did it. He did a great job. Mike Flanagan's a really talented guy, and he's obviously done Gerald's Game, which we may mention in a little short while.
We might do, yeah.
Good God.
So I remember what it is with the Sam Raimi thing. Back in 1986, he was going to be adapting Thinner.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And he was going to cast Bruce Campbell as Halleck.
Oh, why did this not happen?
Don't know. Tom Holland did a really good job of it. And Thinner's one of his, I think, a lost classic. And I mean, you can argue Raimi basically did his own version of a Stephen King film with Drag Me to Hell.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
and it has the same gypsy curse, which is part of Thinner, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm getting confused. It's Doctor Strange Raimi's doing, not Doctor Sleep.
Different.
That'll be what that's the thing. See, I never get things completely right.
That's quite all right. We've all been very guilty of that. Damn these GPs. Thinner is actually a little underrated, actually, and the movie is it's got quite an impressive feat of special effects for the time, which is I think the guy's name is Robert Burke. It's the guy that played RoboCop in the one that wasn't very good, and he loses an enormous amount of weight, as King did, kind of the time of Richard Bachman. So The Shining. Well, have you got any more discussion points on The Shining before we head on forwards?
No, just I would say if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it, make a point of seeing it.
Yeah.
Because so much horror followed. I'd argue that, like auteurs like Mike Flanagan, Ari Aster, Kubrick, despite his disdain for horror, I think The Shining was one of those films that really kind of showed people, it isn't just virgins the last to die being chased. Although there is, as I said, the disconnect between source material and adaptation, it's a bloody good film, and history's been really, really kind to it.
It has. It's 40 years old, which is why we did this show this year, and it still holds up really well. Even though that famous scene has been spoofed so many times, there's nothing really funny about that scene. I mean, it is the whole movie has a great stream of black humor, but that sequence is still really unsettling, even though we've seen all the parodies and there's been many of them. I think it is ageless.
And as you say, Matt, even if you're saying people, if they haven't seen it, get out and watch it. But if you haven't seen it for a long time, watch it again, because there'll be loads of stuff that you'll go, oh, I forgot about that bit, or you'll see something different in it and be like, oh, I understand now. So yeah, it's one of those films you can just watch over again, and you will see something different every time.
Yeah, and I was thinking, Sarah, there's again, it's a documentary on something or other, probably on YouTube, but Wendy Carlos, who was like one of the, I think, 4 different composers that worked on the movie's mad sound. She built like an instrument for the movie, and there's a really cute little video. Wendy Carlos is quite an interesting character who did a lot of the music for A Clockwork Orange. And she's surrounded by cats in this video, and the cat's like climbing all over her equipment. And she talks about the instrument that she created especially for The Shining, which gave this strange vocal sound. And I mean,
that might be the sound that I'm trying to figure out what it was made from.
There's a lot, isn't there? I mean, there's the weird gong that kicks in. There's like a Celestia. There's some Penderecki music in there. Bela Bartok did some of it. It's such a heady mixture of sounds, and that's such a big part of this movie's effect, I think, especially the opening as well.
No, I need to check her out. Sorry, what was her name again?
She's Wendy Carlos, although I can't remember if I think she was Walter Carlos, and then she changed gender, possibly in between Clockwork and The Shining, but Walter, Wendy are the same person.
Okay, cool.
And she comes across really lovely and quirky and interesting, and the cats steal the show in whatever documentary this was that I watched her with her bizarre instrument. So yeah, check that out. In fact, it's one of those movies, as we've hinted at, where the making of it is just as interesting as the film itself. And anybody who does go back and watch for the first time or rewatch The Shining for the 11th, 20th time, you should also check out Room 237, the Rodney Asher documentary, which is an extraordinary breeze through the many different theories, some of which are totally mind-boggling, and some of which you go, oh, okay, well. Room 237, great documentary, actually, which I think is on Prime as well. So, yeah. Well, so that was The Shining in its 40th year. It hasn't aged a day. And The Shining was in the early days of King adaptations. In fact, it was the third, unbelievably. A pretty heady start, really, to have your first few adaptations of your novels directed by Brian De Palma, Tobe Hooper, and Stanley Kubrick, with Cronenberg and others waiting just around the corner, Romero as well. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do, we're not going to go through all of them, because as you know, there's 7,642 adaptations of Stephen King's work. Yeah. And there was that period where he was selling his short stories for $1 to film students. He still does it. Wow. Yeah. That's awesome. Did you ever watch, is it The Woman in the Room, the short film, which was a film student affair? There's some interesting ones, I think. So yeah, we'll cover some of these. We've each developed our own top 10 favourites, of course, which will be a hugely fun source of arguments, especially if anyone put Carrie 2013 in there. Not mentioning any names. But I think you'll probably agree it's a pretty tough job. As much as critics may jest and people may skeptically say that there have been a lot of dodgy adaptations of Stephen King, there's also been a huge amount of really, really good ones, and we've just discussed one of the greats. So what I think we'll do in the traditional fashion of the Eurovision Song Contest is if we go to each of us in turn as we go through our top 10 from 10 to 1, if that sounds all right to you guys.
Yeah, no problem.
Yep.
And along the way, we'll obviously branch off into some of the other stuff, because the adaptations, as many listeners will know, range from franchises that won't quit, like Children of the Corn 312, through to dramas, dramas that got a huge amount of, unlike the initial run of The Shining, got a huge amount of critical love. And of course, a lot of famous directors that came along and did their own bit, just like Kubrick did. So let's start, Sarah, with your lovely number 10.
With my number 10. Okay, my number 10 is Maximum Overdrive from 1986.
Hey.
Start with the good ones.
Yeah.
Just
nice.
Which was directed by Stephen King.
Yes, his only one as a director.
His very only one. And yeah, it's crazy fun, and it has Emilio Estevez in it, who is just great. I love his little laugh. And the crazy robots. He is, isn't he?
Yeah. It's got a mad cast, because it's got, what's her name from The Simpsons? Yeardley Smith.
Yeardley Smith, yeah.
The voice of Lisa.
And it also has Frankie Faison in it as well, who's I think he's the lorry driver of the one with the face on it. Does it have a name, that lorry?
The Green Goblin one.
That's the one, yeah. He's the driver of that. He is, he goes on later to, he plays Sugar in Banshee.
Yeah, he's also in The Wire as well.
Sorry?
He's also in The Wire as well, Frankie Faison.
Ah, cool.
Yeah. And The Wire I use as a shorthand for film and television royalty, as far as I'm concerned. But
Maximum Overdrive. Do you know what the best thing I think about Maximum Overdrive? Did you ever watch the like teaser trailer to Maximum Overdrive?
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's on YouTube, of course, like everything, but it's basically Stephen King grinning at the camera and saying, if you want a job done well, do it yourself. And he's talking about obviously making his films. And the movie, which he described as a Big Mac movie, he kind of hated it. He didn't like his own directorial debut. But the movie was only ever set out to be a kind of heavy metal horror movie, which, of course, it has this big AC/DC soundtrack. And
yeah,
it's deliberately silly, and it doesn't quite pan out. Like, I was always disappointed. I think it tails off when it's just the truck going round and round and round. But the first half is awesome, with the soda machines going wrong and the lawnmower that runs over a kid.
The cash machine that tells him to fuck himself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it just goes straight into it, really. It doesn't beat about the bush and give you this like story beforehand. You get the words on the screen saying about the comet, the Earth being in the tail of the comet, and that's it. And things start going crazy, and the bridge goes up. That's quite cool as well.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot going on in the first half an hour, and obviously it was a short story called Trucks to start with, which is a fun story, and it is that high concept thing. It also, I suppose, follows a bunch of vehicle-based homicide movies like Duel and The Car from the 70s. It is just good fun. I mean, what's your thoughts on Maximum Overdrive, Matt?
We were talking about this just before we started. I'm going to go with what they used to say on the Far Show, which is bad films are brilliant because at least they try. And also the Dave Chappelle quote, cocaine's a hell of a drug. It's a really, really, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a heavy metal domestic beer. Switch your brain off. It's not a metaphor for the human condition. And I think it's telling that it's his only film he's ever directed.
Yeah.
It's really unsubtle. It's not it's a good bad movie, like The Core, in the sense of you watch it, and even the bad bits are enjoyable. I can't hate it, but it's definitely, it wouldn't probably wouldn't go in my top 10.
I was going to say, it's not going to appear any higher up on your list then.
No.
Oh, he's just teasing. It's number one, isn't it? It is interesting that he himself was just as critical of it as anybody was, which is quite touching that, he would be so self-deprecating. And it's also interesting, I think, that a couple of his other things that he wrote directly for the screen have a similar kind of goofy feel, like Sleepwalkers was at the time, I believe, his first movie written directly for the screen, not based on anything else. And Sleepwalkers is this weird mishmash of slightly awkward humour and incest and these shape-shifting creatures. So I think the trashy side of Stephen King came out in a couple of these things, and that's not really a bad thing. I think it's good to mix up. No one can deliver Shawshank every time.
No.
But Maximum Overdrive, straight in at number 10. Excellent.
Yeah.
What's your number 10? Yeah, actually, it's nice to give it some love. At the time, back in the VHS days, and I was 10 years old or something like that, Maximum Overdrive was probably my favourite film of that year because it delivered the stuff that I wanted it to deliver. But yeah, there we go. What's your number 10, Matt?
I am going to say on my list, I actually put Christine.
Oh, Christine,
yeah. Mostly because I'd watched John Carpenter film The Phone Book. I also, one of the things that I really, really liked about it was the central performance by Keith Gordon.
Yeah,
Terrific.
He's great.
Yeah.
He embodied, and obviously reading the book, he was Arnie to me. But when I watched it, in particular, it was just the way that it kind of
the way you pictured him.
Yeah, and also, the other guy, John Stockwell, who plays like he's the one of the forms in literature that they talk about is called the rebel, the follower, and the witness. And despite the fact that it's probably quite an undersung, underappreciated role, Stockwell, I think, really kind of captures that someone who's watching a friendship die in real time and doesn't know how to handle it.
Yeah, and he's also like the popular one.
Yeah.
He could just ditch Arnie and not worry about him, but he sticks with him, and he might be cool and popular with everyone else, but he still values his friendship with Arnie.
Yeah, and I just in terms of, there's that one sequence where Christine is on fire and racing down the road after that, after one of the guys, and that is just, I think, such a fantastic sequence.
Oh, it's true Carpenter, isn't it? Because it's got that great piece of music, that fantastic synth score. Yeah, Keith Gordon is great. He became a really, really talented director later on, but this was his, because he's in Dressed to Kill. I always liked him in Dressed to Kill as the geeky kid. Yeah, he's terrific.
He did the couple episodes of Fargo and The Leftovers as well. In fact, he's done some brilliant television stuff. Better Call Saul, Legion, a ton of Dexter as well.
I didn't realise that. I knew about Legion, but not Dexter. Wow, okay.
Yeah, no, he's done very well for himself as a director. And that would be my top 10. That would be my number 10.
Fantastic. I always thought it was underrated, and Carpenter was relatively cold about it and the way it turned out, as far as I remember. But there's no more Carpenter-ish film than that in style terms, but it does have that great character, and you really root for him. And Keith Gordon does such a good job of becoming just a bit of a bastard in the second half. He makes a really believable spin on this geeky character in the first half. Yeah, nice to see some love for Christine, actually. It nearly made my top 10. Actually, my number 10 had to kick out a lot of good films like Dolores Claiborne, Christine, It Chapter 1. I teetered over that. The Green Mile was in there for a while, but didn't make the cut. So my number 10 is Gerald's Game, which when I read the book, I was possibly too young at first to fully appreciate it, and I went back to it and thought, this is fantastic, and no one will ever film it. And of course it came out, and Mike Flanagan did it, and probably only through the current mediums that we have, in this case Netflix, would this movie get made, certainly not by a mainstream studio. This is a tough one. This is a kind of one-room theatrical piece, a lot of long takes, feels quite European in its style. It's got an amazing performance by Carla Gugino, again in a really difficult role. The movie, or the book, the whole story really is structured around her interacting with other personalities, her younger self. She's got these interior monologues, but it's such a compelling film. It cleverly uses its horror elements. It is about a woman chained to a bed. It has probably the most horrific thing I've seen in a movie for years, and I've visibly winced, and it doesn't happen that much. So jaded.
No, yeah, it's hard to watch. You do wince, and your hand stings.
Yeah, I mean, there's more disturbing stuff in the movie, like the stuff with Henry Thomas as her dad in the flashbacks during the scene set to the eclipse, which is something that recurs in King's work. But the scene in question, anybody that's watched Gerald's Game will know that's a gore moment. That's no fun to watch whatsoever. But it's a great example of increasing trend in King's later books of these really terrific female lead characters, and the book itself is followed by Dolores and Rose Madder, and this is one of the best. So yeah, probably should have been higher. I don't know, it's tough. But number 10, Gerald's Game. So let's move on to Sarah, your number 9.
My number 9 is Stand By Me. Probably one of the first Stephen King movies I watched when I was a kid without realising it was a Stephen King movie.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I think that. Yeah.
Actually. Yeah, it's one of the things that I think King does well is the warmth he has. In terms of he does horrible things to his characters, as every writer does. I mean, like with Laughing Boy, I liked Tommy, but that was precisely why you put characters through trials, because you get to see who they are underneath. And Stand By Me is one of the archetypal, Odyssey kids go on a journey into manhood. Particularly as well with the framing device of the film of obviously Richard Dreyfuss looking back on it, which gives it a lovely context. Yeah, it's a beautiful film.
It had a couple of scenes that were quite disturbing as well, though, that I remember when I was a kid. The bit where he nearly gets hit by a train.
Yeah.
I found that quite shocking. And then the whole cringe-worthiness of when they're swimming in the swamp and then they get out and they're covered in leeches.
Yeah.
And I just remember it being very, very sweet and just thinking to myself, oh my God, Kiefer Sutherland's a bit of a bastard. He's not very nice in that. Yeah.
He's a really impressive bully.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a really great cast of young kids, wasn't it, that went on to do good things.
River Phoenix,
Will Wheaton, River Phoenix, Corey Feldman.
Yeah.
They're all so good. The movie nails how they're not small, how adolescent boys talk to each other. Yeah. It totally gets that. I think watching it at that age as well, it really felt really real. They're so good in that movie. And the bittersweet ending of Richard Dreyfuss, as you said, and the gross out stuff, the very King things that people would most associate with him, the leeches, and is it the big barfing scene? Is that blueberry pie or something? I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, it's the eating contest, isn't it?
The pie eating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very big gross out sequence in otherwise, like you said, a really quite sweet drama about these kids coming of age. It's possibly my favourite of those ones, it and a few others which are focused on children. Sometimes they come back as some cool villains, but the bully in Stand By Me is probably the best. Yeah, lovely film. Your number 9, Matt.
My number 9 is... One second, let me just pull the list up again. Number 9. When it's interesting, it didn't come into your top 10. Dolores Claiborne.
Excellent.
Mostly because, you can watch it and enjoy it as an adaptation of a very good Stephen King book, but also it's a wonderful piece of filmmaking. Fantastic performances, beautifully shot. Again, Kathy Bates is one of those, it's Taylor Hackford, and one of the things I like about Taylor Hackford's films is that although they're very commercial, they're also beautifully, beautifully done. The soundtrack as well is really good. Danny Elfman did the music for it, and it's wonderful, and it's great that he was able to sort of really, really capture, and the film did as well, the nuances of the mother-daughter relationship, and the way that you learn like what Dolores has done to protect herself and her daughter. That's my number 9.
It's really good, that, isn't it? The style where they differentiate between the time periods, I remember being really, really inventive. And yeah, she's great. It's a great book. It's one of his shortest, isn't it? It's I remember, but it's so compact. It's so well done. Yeah, excellent. My number 9. I don't know. It's tricky, but I went for Cujo for number 9, which, as far as I remember, is the book that he doesn't remember writing because he was too off his face on crack. I think it was that one. The book's tough, actually. The book's tougher than the movie. The kid dies in Cujo, the book. And it's quite a grim affair. And actually, what I like about the movie is that even though it doesn't get as grim as that, the movie also is really downbeat. It's got what I think is a bravely, quite unsympathetic character that you truly root for by the end, which is played by Dee Wallace, who was on a run of genre stuff and E.T. at this time. And she's having an affair. She's trapped in this kind of boring marriage, and she's got a kid that's afraid of a monster in the closet. And it's so well played, and you gradually come to root for her. The dog attack is largely confined to the second half. So the first half, as we've seen with other films we've mentioned already, is more like a drama. Yeah. And then she's confined to the car with her son, who's getting sicker by the minute. And the second half is this pretty terrifying siege scenario, which is really well done in terms of the dog itself, which I think was a mixture of puppets and a real dog and animatronics. It's extremely well directed. But yeah, I always thought Cujo was a bit underrated. It does have one of those dodgy, we've seen this all before, last-minute scares, which clearly was influenced by the hand out of the ground in Carrie. But you forgive it because the rest of the movie is so tense and downbeat and interesting. So yeah, Cujo, my number 9. And naturally, number 8, Sarah.
Number 8. Oh, where am I? Number 8 is okay. My number 8 is Stephen King's little anthology, Cat's Eye, 1985.
Yes.
I really
Nice.
enjoyed that. That's one that I've only recently watched, to be fair. I didn't actually see it at the time or anything. But I really, really enjoyed the little wraparound story of the cat being involved in every single story. And little Drew Barrymore as well in the last one. She was fabulous.
Yeah, with a little thing that tries to steal her breath.
The little troll, yeah.
That's
evil
a great
troll.
story. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really sweet. She calls the cat the General.
The General. That's awesome. And there's all the jokes, isn't there? The King jokes, like Christine pops up and Cujo is
right
running.
in the front of right at the start. Cujo chases the cat and then runs in front of a car, which then has Christine written on the back.
Yeah, just in case you didn't know.
Yeah, didn't know who this was.
Yeah, I really like Cat's Eye, actually. It got a bit of a bum rap, I think, for a movie that's just meant to be fun. And it really is fun. Yeah. And I quite like Drew Barrymore in Firestarter, which was a year before, and also a movie that wasn't well loved, but I actually have a bit of affection for Firestarter. I think it's got an amazing cast of George C. Scott and Martin Sheen, but it's quite a fun movie. But Cat's Eye also has James Woods in the what's it? I've forgotten what the story's called, but he's giving up smoking and he goes
Quitter Incorporated.
That's it. I like that story too. I remember Robert Hayes walking around a very tall building and being bothered by a pigeon in the in the ledge.
That's quite funny. It just keeps pecking his foot.
Yeah. But I think, apart from the General, I think the memorable stuff is like James Woods' fag-induced hallucinations. Cat's Eyes. Oh, great choice. I'd kind of forgotten about that. I haven't watched it for a while, but yeah. Matt, who did you pigeonhole at number 8?
The Dark Half.
Ah, interesting. Okay, cool.
Again, a lot of these for me is because some of his books I hold in far more regard than others. As I was saying before we were recording, to me, Stephen King, although you couldn't get two more different people, is like Prince in that even his bad stuff is interesting.
Yeah.
However, I love The Dark Half with a passion as a book, and I thought the film did a bloody good job of, particularly with the casting. Alan Pangborn in Castle Rock, who turns up in a number of his books. I love Michael Rooker as Alan Pangborn.
Yeah, he is the best.
I kind of wish in a perfect world they'd have kept it there, because he
kept him in it, yeah.
He kind of captures that kind of rangy disbelief in that, but it's quite a consistent film in the sense of, obviously the more we realise that George Stark exists and that it isn't Tad Beaumont solely losing his mind. I particularly like the performances of it. I think they did a really good job with the end sequence with the sparrows.
Yes.
It's some really good special effects.
And as well, the makeup on George as he's starting to fall apart.
Yeah.
Looks he's described as like having like canker sores on his face and everything. And I thought, again, it was one of those films where Romero got to play on a major stage, and I think it did a very good job.
Yeah, that is a good movie, actually. And Timothy Hutton is so great, isn't he, as Stark and Thad? And it was really great when I saw him in The Haunting of Hill House, the TV show, because I'd always wondered, what happened to Timothy Hutton? And, voila.
Well, because he did Leverage. I don't know if you ever saw that.
No.
Leverage is basically Ocean's 11, the TV show.
Okay.
It's on Amazon Prime. It's one of my feel-good watches. You know when you want to binge watch something just to cheer you up a bit that's not...
okay.
Sure.
It's basically like a Heist of the Week show, like Hustle. And yeah, he's the main guy in that. And yeah, he's a fantastic actor. Part of the Brat Pack, wasn't he?
Yes, he was, yeah. Is he in St. Elmo's Fire?
I believe he is.
Because I know he won the Academy Award for playing the suicidal kid in Ordinary People, the Robert Redford movie. And then I always thought he didn't quite get the big break he deserved. But yeah, he's great in The Dark Half. Romero's non-zombie stuff is interesting, and that's another of those ones which probably should be better known.
Yeah.
I will breeze over 8 because I also chose Stand By Me, which I had to have in my top 10 because I think it's so wonderful. And another good example, I suppose, of a non-horror director stepping in and doing Stephen King movie, Rob Reiner, who then, of course, did Misery, which may pop up later. Sarah, what's your number 7? Maybe.
My number 7 is one we've already mentioned, which was Matt's number 10. So my number 7 is Christine.
Nice. What do you love about Christine?
Pretty much the same as what Matt said, just the way they portrayed Arnie, and I do love the look of the car as well, the way they put her back together and she fixes herself and stuff. And there's one thing that I always found very funny about it though, is the guy that plays the bully, the one that threatens them with a knife at the start, Buddy. He is obviously like in his mid-30s.
He's a teenager.
He's like the Luke Perry of Christine.
But yeah, it's a really good fun film, really interesting to watch. Like you say, it has a lot of levels and a lot of layers to it, and of course it's John Carpenter, so the soundtrack and music is just fantastic. So yeah, beautiful. I got a lot of love for that one.
I was always, when I watched Christine a lot when I was just getting into horror movies, and the scene where, like you said, the great mechanical effects of Christine coming back to life after she's been totally beaten to buggery by the bullies is so fantastic. And like Matt, I really like the book as well, actually. I think the book is a little underrated. What a cast. That movie's got Harry Dean Stanton, and Robert Blossom is the old guy that owned Christine when he first discovers him. Kelly Preston's in it. Christine is something special. Cool. Great choice. So my number 7 is Salem's Lot, the Toby Hooper movie, which was really a TV miniseries, although it got chopped down and released over here in theatres in a 2-hour version. But Salem's Lot is important for me. I watched it. It's one of the earliest horror things I watched, and from what I could remember, or from what I could discover using the internet, is that it was shown on BBC One over 2 nights in about 1983 or 1984. So I would have been about 5 when I watched it. And it's terrifying, actually. The book's great. I read the book when I was quite young, but after seeing the miniseries, and Toby Hooper, who got this gig obviously on the strength of Texas Chainsaw, but had to be restrained by the very tight restrictions of network TV at the time, did an awesome job. I think it's got one of the great vampires in movie history.
Yes.
Mr. Barlow, obviously inspired by Nosferatu, but one of Stephen King's great monsters. And he's a writer who loves monsters. We shouldn't forget that. A lot of his movies are influenced by EC Comics and by old monster movies. And it's got Stray Kid James Mason in the film. And it has the scariest thing, possibly the scariest thing we've ever seen, which is the kid vampire knocking on the window, the bedroom window of his friend, obviously dead, begging him to be let in. There's also a scene that gave me nightmares, which was rare, actually, because horror movies rarely gave me nightmares, even as a kid, but where there's a home invasion where the vampire turns up at dinner and bashes the parents' heads together. So that was strong stuff, and it holds up. I've watched it again. And, of course, it has none more sexy than David Soul as the hero, one of King's writer heroes, Ben Mears. And, maybe we had a little crush on David Soul.
See, like, the whole writer hero thing, it's tempting because you can use that to show head authority in terms of, if you mention drafting with a degree of confidence, people will go, oh yeah, this is clearly a writer, and it would save me a lot of work. But that's the reason why I've avoided it.
Yeah.
Precisely because it's too much of an out. But King's done it more than once, and I understand that, and it's probably something I'll tackle at some point as a writer. But yeah, I agree with you there. Pet Sematary, solid. What did you think of? Because didn't they do a remake of that?
Yeah, they did Salem's Lot.
Yeah,
I was about to ask.
They did a remake with Rutger Hauer and Rob Lowe, I believe, was the David Soul role. And it wasn't bad. I've only seen it once, so I don't have that much to remember. I mean, it wasn't nearly as terrifying, but from memory, it was actually okay. It wasn't The Shining with Steven Weber with a croquet mallet. It was devoid of topiary animals, but yeah, it was all right. I mean, I think having Rutger Hauer in it helped it enormously. But it was a tough one. Again, it was a really tough one because forever ingrained in my brain is Reggie Nalder as the terrifying Mr. Barlow and James Mason as his dapper assistant. Always liked the Salem's Lot. Good old Toby Hooper. And Toby Hooper had the kind of less great glory of coming back to Stephen King territory to make The Mangler, which is the one about the possessed laundromat.
Yeah.
A few decades later, which isn't great, although it does have Robert Englund in it, and people get munched through this machine, dodgy laundry press. Matt, you're number 7.
My number 7 is 1922.
Oh wow, I watched this 3 days ago.
Oh, I loved it.
It's great.
The original novella, which again, talking before the recording, is In All Dark No Stars.
Yeah.
I think it's one of my favourite things he's ever written. In terms of the fact that it captures the kind of rawness of, like the real monster of that is obviously the protagonist, like the road to hell, in terms of he destroys himself. He gets what he wants only to be destroyed by it, and it destroys everything around him. But the film was fantastic. Thomas Jane, I think, is a really underrated actor. It doesn't spare anything in terms of going for what he calls the gross out with the rats. And again, Mike Patton from Faith No More did the music for that. And
You're joking.
No.
I love him.
Yeah. Yeah, Mike Patton did the soundtrack.
Oh, I absolutely love him.
Yeah.
I need to see this one. I haven't seen it.
No, it's on Netflix. It's well worth it. And also, one of, I think, the probably the most I think the most important performance is the actress who plays Wilf's wife,
Molly Parker,
Molly
yeah.
Parker. Yeah, the actress Molly Parker. I think because it would be too easy in a lesser adaptation to just make her like slatternly and evil and everything, but she manages to bring a real sense of like sympathy to it, and one of the things that I like about the film, and it makes what's subtext in the book is that, you know, Wilf is a horrible person, and you know, his justification and his actions thereafter, you know, like you kind of have sympathy for him, but also you kind of know he had it coming.
Yeah, you do root for him at a certain point.
Yeah.
Which is the genius of it, and the horror of the murder itself that kicks everything off. Yeah, she's very good. I like the really awkward interaction with the son as well.
Yeah. Which again goes back to what you were saying with the scene with in The Shining, is that one of the things King does is King kind of captures the beauty and the awkwardness of the father-son relationship.
Yeah.
You know, in those terms, because it is very difficult sometimes, and I you know, it's even more difficult, I think, raising kids in the age of the internet. Because there's a point where as an adolescent, your peers become more important to you than your parents.
Yeah.
It's a painful thing to go through, and I've gone through it twice with mine.
Sure. And
one of the things about 1922 that I loved and really resonated with was, you know, the whole thing of it's a kind of a depression noir piece as well. So you've obviously got like the EC comics of the rats and everything else, but
and the Poe stuff, yeah.
If you stripped out the supernatural elements, it would be like I don't know if you've seen it. It's just come on Netflix, The Devil All the Time.
No, that's on my list.
Yeah. It's that is basically a Stephen King thing without ghosts, without monsters in it, and well worth a watch. But yeah, that's my choice.
Nice. Yeah, 1922 is really, really strong, actually. And we may be mentioning Thomas Jane at some point later, of course. Perhaps. So, number 6, Sarah.
My number 6 is Misery.
Oh, yes. Wonderful.
Oh, we haven't mentioned that one yet. Sorry, I was then thinking, I'm sure we've mentioned that one now. No, no. It's just another very good, well, character-based or character-driven, amazing performance from Kathy Bates and James Caan, really, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredible, yeah.
And also, again, pretty semi-autobiographical.
Yeah. Misery's tremendous. She's incredible. I have such sympathy for her, as terrifying as she can be. You really root for her as much as you do James Caan, actually. The little ceramic penguin that faces east or west?
Ooh, I think, doesn't it face, or isn't it supposed to face east?
Yeah,
and it ends
that was
up
the
getting
giveaway.
faced the other way, yeah.
Now, have you seen the Castle Rock TV show? Because she's in that now, isn't she? It's Lizzie Kaplan playing.
I haven't watched it. I need to watch it.
So basically, she's turned up in Castle Rock, Annie, and it's almost like a prequel in terms of, like, she's actually has her shit together, and Lizzie Kaplan is a very attractive, strong actress. So it's quite interesting to watch. But yeah, Misery's fantastic, book and film.
Yeah, it does have extraordinary moments, doesn't it? It has like another of those horrifying writer moments where she sets fire to his manuscript, or she makes him set fire to it, I think.
Yeah.
And the hobbling sequence is one of those iconic moments in
it makes
horror
you wince.
history. It does. And she rightly got the Oscar for this. There was no contest there. Although I always thought that he was a little overshadowed because she's so great. He's got a pretty tough job there, playing the role, being confined to the bed for the most of the part. But he really captures Paul's kind of festering resentment, his increasing bitterness and sarcasm that comes out. And he's quite funny in the role, as nightmarish as it is. Also, I love the stuff with the kind of comedy old sheriff and his
and
lovely
his
horny
sweet little
wife.
wife. Yeah. Yeah, and they are very, very sweet, and it's really sad how he cracks it eventually.
Yeah,
He gets it,
yeah,
and then he's just literally just gets blown away straight away.
That's
Oh,
harsh.
it's quite sad. It is harsh, yeah.
Again, it's like Halloween in The Shining, isn't it? Like you
Yeah.
kind of have like this amiable character you root for, and then they turn up and confront the antagonist, and then die in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
It's that cruel trick again. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still think the final battle with those two is incredibly tense and brutal, where he's shoving the papers in her mouth and she gets bashed on the head with a typewriter. That feels really tough. And I remember seeing a clip of KMB creating a Kathy Bates dummy, and I was overwhelmed by that dummy. It's an astonishing piece of makeup effect or practical dummy effect. Yeah, Misery's great. Great script by William Goldman did the script for Misery. And I watched Hearts in Atlantis recently, which Goldman also wrote, which I thought was quite lovely, which is a lighter variant, I suppose, on Stand By Me in a lot of ways, but with some quite lovely moments. So, again, King's film work attracted some major names. Misery was my number 5, so it was tough finding a place for it, actually, because it's something I have huge affection for. But yeah, Kathy. So, Matt, I think, what's your number 6?
The Dead Zone.
Mine too. Mine number 6 too. Good Lord.
Ooh. That didn't make it on my list.
Cronenberg. Christopher Walken.
Yeah.
I remember reading an interview with King where he talked about it in context of the book, and how would you make a John Wilkes Booth or a Lee Harvey Oswald a protagonist, and it works so well. As much because of the fact that Christopher Walken looks perpetually haunted, which I've always liked. And I think Tom Skerritt plays Stilson, doesn't he?
Oh, Martin Sheen plays Stilson. Yeah,
that's it, Martin Sheen. Kind of ironic if you've ever seen The West Wing.
It's great.
I'm thinking Tom Skerritt, because Tom Skerritt plays Bannerman, doesn't he? And Bannerman is another recurring character in King's books as well. One of the things that I liked about the film in particular was the kind of the gentleness of the romance between Johnny and Sarah. Because it's Brooke Adams, who's such an underrated actress.
She's wonderful.
She's in my kind of fantasy crush list along with Phoebe Cates.
Yes.
And
David Soul.
Yeah, Brooke Adams, I thought did a wonderful job in that.
That's heartbreaking, isn't it?
Anyway, weren't she? Because she was in the 1978 Invasion of the Body Snatchers as well,
which is an astonishing film. Yeah. It's so heartbreaking, isn't it? Because she's moved on. He's in a coma for 5 years or something, and there is that tension between them. So well played.
They have a little bit of a scene at the fair, don't they? And you kind of get the feeling like if it hadn't happened to him, they'd be married with a couple of kids right now. And it's the kind of sense of, it's the whole thing of, he's burdened with this gift.
Yeah.
The viewer were right there with him, but we know full well, because when it happens in real life, nobody ever goes, maybe he had a point. It's a horrific act, but the wonderful thing about the film is that it plays to both Cronenberg and King's strengths.
Yeah.
In that Cronenberg does paranoia incredibly well, and it's a paranoid book.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very Cronenberg film, isn't it? And it's interesting that he did these movies and got what I think were the best performances out of Walken or James Woods in Videodrome, and Jeff Goldblum a few years later. Incredible period. Even though this, I suppose,
has. I mean, Viggo Mortensen in A History of Violence and Eastern Promises.
Yeah. There's an astonishing array of these male leads, and it's quite dialed down. I remember it's quite Canadian. It's people cry, but they hide their face when they're crying. It's quite dialed down emotionally, but it's so emotionally absorbing. You really root for Christopher Walken. You want him to get back together with Brooke Adams. Martin Sheen's playing it massive as the as Greg Stilson, who would become a meme years later, wouldn't he, when Trump came to power? Yeah, and I quite like the serial killer subplot in it, which has such a grim ending. I've never seen someone commit suicide by forcing themselves onto a pair of scissors before.
Oh yeah, that's
That's
quite nasty.
That's the only moment of gore in the movie, from what I remember.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
And it hits hard, that one moment.
It's almost, I'd say it's almost more science fiction than horror, isn't it, The Dead Zone?
Yeah, I guess it is, yeah. It is in that realm. There's lovely stuff as well with Walken's parents in the film. It's such a good film, that. I think it really is one of the very best. I haven't read the book for a long time, but it is one I would go back and read. Tom Skerritt as the sheriff. Yep, awesome movie, The Dead Zone. So that was also my number 6. It's got a beautiful score as well by Michael Kamen. I remember that very well. Cool. So in the top 5, the big top 5, my number 5 we've already had, which was Misery. So, Sarah.
Oh, my number 5 is one we've already had as well, which is The Dark Half.
Nice.
That was Matt's number 8, and I just love it for basically the exact same reasons as what Matt said.
I was so worried you were going to say The Dark Tower then. I really was.
Oh, no. No, that
There's no movie of The Dark Tower.
No, there's not. No.
Science fiction.
That film does not exist in this dojo.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention The Dead Zone as well, because, I don't have it on my list, because I read the book to death.
Yeah.
When we go on to the books and stuff, but when I sat and watched the film, it took me quite a while to actually get into it. I didn't see Christopher Walken as Johnny to start off with. It gets better as it goes along, the film, but I don't have as much love for that as I do for The Dark Half, the film adaptation of The Dark Half, which is another book that I read to death, and obviously it's George Romero, so I do love him, and Michael Rooker as well. So that's a brilliant film.
Nice. Your number 5, Matt.
The recent Pet Sematary.
Oh, I'm glad someone had this in. Wow, yes.
A number of reasons. One, I thought it's been out a while, so I think we can safely disregard spoilers.
Go ahead.
Obviously, in the book, the different child dies and gets resurrected. Yeah. And I thought it was such an inspired choice.
Yes.
To make it the daughter. Also, as well, one of the wonderful things is when you see advances in special effects that don't suck. The cat is absolutely, I'm not. I say that I haven't got cat-related trauma from not killing it. But it's a fantastic piece of special effects. Also, as well, I think John Lithgow does a wonderful job.
Oh, I love him.
He's great,
and he really kind of captures the amiable warmth of the character, and it actually sort of quite upset me when Judd dies. But I think I don't know how you pronounce her first name, something Lawrence, Jette Lawrence, and Jason Clarke. Who's also in The Devil All the Time as well, and he's fantastic in that as well. So that's my choice. I love the original version of it. It's the actress from Star Trek Next Generation is the wife in that, isn't it?
Denise Crosby, yeah.
But the recent 2019 Pet Sematary would be my choice.
That's a great choice. Yeah, I wanted to put that in there, but I just didn't find space. I thought they did great. I totally agree with you. The clever rug pull of the different child perishing on the road, because it totally changed the story, didn't it? It totally changed the emotional impact of the second half. And there's such a harrowing scene where the revived dead daughter's in the bathtub and he's brushing her hair, I think, and it's falling out as he's doing so. And she's bewildered. There was something like the impact of moments in Let the Right One In that I found in those moments. I also think that the 1989 version, when I've rewatched it, I loved it when I was growing up, but there's some terrible acting in the 1989 version. It's just so awful. and they really, and the horrible manipulation of certain scenes in the 1989 film. Although, that said, the 1989 film does have the most terrifying thing of the 80s possibly, which is the portrait of Zelda, the literally twisted sister in the room upstairs with I've forgotten what the spinal disease she has in the story, but spinal meningitis. Yes, that's such a horrifying. I mean, admittedly, she's turned into a kind of horror movie ghoul, but the impact of that on 11-year-old me was not lost. But yeah, the new version is better acted. It has a better ending, I think, as well.
Yeah, and the alternate ending as well.
I haven't seen the alternate ending.
Well, in that one, Louis spares Ellie. They bury Rachel. They burn the house down as they did in the original, and then you sort of see Gage is still locked in there, and they sort of like it leads with Louis holding Gage, who's crying in his arms, and it's a really it's on the DVD.
Oh, cool!
Yeah,
nice. Yeah, I had a lot of respect for that. The filmmakers behind that did a film I really like called Starry Eyes, which I'm guessing is why they got the job of this. But yeah, good example of a remake, or in this case, I suppose, just another adaptation of the book being superior to one that I always used to like, admittedly.
Yeah, and slower burning as well, which I really liked.
Absolutely. It needed that time, didn't it? It needed time, which the other one's quite an MTV-paced horror movie from the period. It's on to the next set piece. This one, I agree. I was so impressed by Pet Sematary. Nice, very cool. Well, we're getting into the really hot stuff now. So, number 4.
Oh, have you done your number 5, Stephen?
Oh, it was Misery. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Ooh, number 4. Okay, my number 4. Oh, is Retro Rewind, The Shining.
Ah, that old friend.
We talked about that one.
Yeah, we may have mentioned it. Yeah, The Shining. It's pretty good. Stephen Webber's great. Croquet mallet, topiary animals. Fantastic use of CGI from the 90s. Lovely. The Shining, not much else to say, but you do need to watch Doctor Sleep. That's a high recommend. And Doctor Sleep, of course, as people will know who've watched it, has a kind of astonishing recreation of the Overlook. And when you see it, you'll know why.
Ooh.
Number 4, Matt.
Secret Window. It's Johnny Depp and John Turturro. It's possibly, I think, one of the best on-screen adaptations of Imposter Syndrome. It's a lovely psychological thriller in and of its own right, and I really, it's great cast, and Depp, I think, is fantastic anyway. And David Cope, who's done some absolutely fantastic films.
He's
again,
great.
Philip Glass music, so that's always a pleasure in and of itself. I think David Cope did Stir of Echoes,
which is a brilliant blue-collar ghost story. Kevin Bacon,
that's an adaptation of a Richard Matheson book, isn't it?
Yeah. Another big influence on King. Yeah.
Oh, very much so. So yeah, that's my hat in the ring for that one.
Secret Window is really underrated. I never read what's the original story called? It's something longer.
Secret Window, Secret Garden.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, it's underrated. Yeah, I was really impressed. It was a couple that seemed to be under the radar. That and I think it was 1408 I saw close together. And I really liked both. But yeah, Secret Window, really well cast movie. Yeah, nice. Cool. Number 4. Oh, you've said your number 4, Sarah. Sorry. So number 4, after much agonising and horror and stuff, I went for The Shawshank Redemption, but I'm not sure, it may have to move up higher, but that will be a different day. The Shawshank Redemption really needs no introduction, although it obviously was overlooked at the time and became, in retrospect, a classic relatively quickly after its VHS release. It's just a beautiful film. It's absolutely absorbing. I really like The Green Mile, which is a longer movie. It's even more, I think, about the passage of time, and I think The Green Mile warrants being 3 hours long, and it's by Frank Darabont, who became a major force in adaptations of Stephen King, and rightly so, and we may hear from him again later as well. But yeah, The Shawshank Redemption is such a moving film. It really captures the richness of King's characters, as we've said about so many of the others. Perfectly cast, everyone from obviously Morgan Freeman as the voice of God to people like Clancy Brown and Bob Gunton, who were terrifying. And I remember hearing about the ending. Darabont didn't want the ending it ended up with initially, the whole idea was that you end at the point where Tim Robbins is on his way to hopefully meet Red again after all these years, and the studio insisted on the reconciliation at the very end. But now I can't imagine it without it, because I think you need that. You have, as Mark Kermode is fond of saying, you have a lot of Shawshank to get through before you get to the redemption. And I think it truly earns it. And I get why he would have fought for the original concept of the ending, but I think, as Darabont himself later admitted, the movie really has to have that ending, and it's such a wonderful piece of work. I mean, yeah, a beautiful film. What can we say? Thomas Newman again. Thomas Newman's scores are wonderful, and that's maybe his best. Yeah. Old Shawshank. So number 3.
My number 3 is Cujo.
Yes, excellent.
One we've mentioned already. But yeah, I enjoyed the book immensely. And
Yeah.
I thought, as you say, it does go quite differently in the film, which is a little bit disappointing.
Rooting for the death of the kid.
Always.
Always.
It's always the case. But yeah, anything that involves rabid animals is something that you want to keep your attention. And yeah, like you say, it's the second half of the film is just exhausting to watch. You feel their pain being stuck in the car, and you really do find Cujo. He is pretty scary. He is not looking good as the movie goes on. He's just getting worse and worse, and like bits of him look like they're falling off and all sorts.
It's impressive, isn't it, how they've created that? Do you feel a combination of, because he is frightening? I was quite afraid of dogs when I was little, but you also feel, I think, a lot of pity for him as well. He is a victim also.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just really harrowing to watch
It's
him.
not his fault.
No, it's not. And I think the movie really captures how upsetting it is to see, out of necessity, someone having to bash a dog in. And
a person's pet, it's someone that they know.
Yeah, that's tough going. And
also the breed of dog they chose for it as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks of St. Bernards with the little barrel around their neck.
Rescuing people, saving people from the snow.
Yeah.
Providing them with alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought the remake was a bit disappointing. Beethoven, I thought, didn't really capture the tension.
Yeah, it wasn't quite the same, yeah.
But I get what they were trying for.
I only got through halfway through that.
They saved that for the sequels.
Which are harrowing, yeah. Dee Wallace deserves some kind of... she's such a great actress, isn't she?
Yeah, she is great in that. She's great in a lot of things, but yeah, that's one of my favourite one of her movies.
Yeah, and she carries the whole thing, really. It is very much about her, and the men are useless. I mean, she's shagging one bloke and the husband's rubbish, and so it's just her and the boy for most of it. I remember Ed Lauter, who's a great underrated actor, is this awful, another portrait of masculinity in this dodgy town. He's horrendous bully as well. I think they win the lottery at some point, and it's just misery fest. But yeah, Cujo is a worthy number 3. Number 3, Matt.
I'd say it's technically 2 movies: It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2.
Got it. It's allowed. It's okay.
It's definitely allowed, because that would be my next question.
Yeah, mainly because when they announced they were doing it, I always felt the ideal format for it would have been like an HBO Maxi series. We were talking about the new one, not the 90s one. Yeah. No, not the 90s one, no.
No.
No. I mean, Tim Curry kind of semi-redeems it, but the spider, just no.
Yeah, no, it's not good, is it?
I watched that when I was very young, and even I was just like, really?
Come on. Not scary.
But I thought they did it, and particularly as well in the changes in Chapter 2 of when they're adults.
Yeah. Oh, that was seamless, wasn't it? So good. Yeah. The characters worked so well as the older people.
And just, I mean, Bill Hader is a as soon as they announced the casting for it, particularly Jessica Chastain's Beverly, I was just like, that's exactly who it was in my head. And yeah, I really enjoyed them. They're slick. There's a little bit of a reliance on jump scares, but I think these days with big Hollywood horror movies, it's kind of par for the course.
Sure.
What do you think of Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise?
He's wonderful.
Yeah.
I went through a phase of trying to do the voice. Hello, Georgie. Because it's so evocative. He really, you can tell he really got into it and enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And it adapts an incredibly lengthy book and hits sort of the beats of it really well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of his best books, in all honesty. He could have retired after it. I know I would have been denied a ton of amazing books, but he could have retired after it, and I don't think anyone would have argued with his legacy up to that point.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It was good to see them doing so well. Packed cinema kind of experience. I do have some affection for the 1990 film, but the adult scenes are total garbage, aren't they? I mean, the casting of John Boy Walton and whoever else. Although John Ritter is in the original, isn't he? And he's very good in everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, the childhood scenes in the 1990 vision, I think were very good. But after that, it tails off. This pretty much nailed it. Nice. Number 3. Oh yeah, number 3. My number 3, after much debate, is The Shining, which I put at number 3 just because I wanted the other two that are coming to be 2 and 1. Sarah, your runner-up.
My runner-up I was gonna ask the exact same question as Matt, because my number 2 is the same as Matt's number 3. It's chapter 1 and 2.
Outrageous! 2 films in 1.
I know, the new ones. Same as Matt. Absolutely, I was all over them. Absolutely loved them. The only thing I would point out on chapter 2 is the ending. I wasn't a massive fan of the ending. They possibly should have just left it when they finished off Pennywise and not gone on for another half an hour.
Yeah.
I sort of I undenied over that after watching it, and I was like, you kind of needed that, because in the book, obviously, you have the whole kind of dissolution of the Losers Club.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can definitely see your point there, but I felt it was like a nice little coda of things.
Yeah, I suppose I just felt it kind of made it lose that little bit of momentum. And I have to admit, chapter 1 had more of an effect on me scares-wise than chapter 2 did, but I think that's because you were possibly expecting it more in chapter 2. You know, the way Pennywise was in chapter 1, there was quite a lot of moments that did make you jump. But in chapter 2, he kind of had to ramp it up a little bit more. But I did enjoy, it didn't have quite the same effect. Although the very bit in the beginning in the river was quite freaky in chapter 2. That was in chapter 2.
Oh yeah, that's genuinely nasty, isn't it? That's because I
enjoyed the bits where you see Pennywise before he becomes the clown.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a shame they had that great sequence with the old woman was the centerpiece of the trailer, because that's such a great sequence. And they
it did kind of ruin it a bit for that bit, didn't it?
Yeah, because I was waiting for it and it arrived and this is almost the entire sequence from the trailer. I think the brutality of actually maybe both, but especially the opening section of chapter 2 with the attack on the gay guy and the river scene. That's quite shocking, actually, for a mainstream picture. And it's obviously a big point from the book. Yeah, it's really shocking in the book, Yeah, I thought that was perfect casting of Bill. And Jim,
all of them.
Yeah,
absolutely. They had it spot on. And I really enjoyed, the kids themselves in chapter 1 really held it together. And I do really like the guy, was it Finn Wolfhard that plays young Richie, who's also in Stranger Things. He is awesome.
He's very good. I really liked James Franco, isn't it? Not James Franco, James, the other one called James McAvoy.
Oh yeah, who played older Bill. Yeah.
Yes, I liked him, and I very much liked Jessica Chastain as Beverly.
I really liked the guy that played Ben as well.
Yes.
Older Ben. He was quite fit, after he lost all the weight and stuff. Jay Ryan, I thought he was pretty good.
Sure, yeah.
So, that was my number 2.
Nice job. Matt, you're number 2.
Harry, the Brian De Palma.
Wonderful.
Because it captures... When we were sort of tangentially referring to the 2013 version...
There's a 2013 version?
What struck me is what kind of handsome boy model in high school is it that Chloe Moretz is the ugly, awkward kid?
She's hideous.
Yeah. You know, what sort of school is it where you look at her walking in the front doors and going, ew?
She's downtrodden.
Whereas Sissy Spacek just absolutely captured it. And that last sequence of obviously where she's covered in the pig blood and she unleashes all of that rage and repression. Just it's a timeless sequence.
Incredible, yeah.
Even down to the sound of like the bucket when it sort of falls down, it's a date on the head. Like it just, and the way that even the innocent, the people who actually try and show Carrie kindness, are punished.
The PE teacher.
Who Judy Greer plays in the remake, and like Judy Greer is one of the redeeming things of the 2013 version, because she's fantastic. And Brian De Palma's Carrie would be my number 2.
Oh, it's just wonderful. It's actually my number 2 too, not 2 obviously, although I'm wearing one. Yeah, it's tremendous, and I've watched it many, many times. And a lot of emphasis at the time, quite understandably, was on the style. And it is this massive show-off thing for Brian De Palma with the split screen and the deep focus and the extended slow motion stuff, which the tension is just astonishing. And the great, as you said, sequence where Carrie goes into this trance-like state and kills off everybody that was laughing at her. But I also think it was undersold at the time just how impactful it is as an emotional drama. The first hour has very little horror by conventional standards, and it is this heartbreaking story of Carrie. The harrowing sequence at the start in the locker room is still really upsetting to watch.
Well, it just proves that teenage girls are the most terrifying force on earth.
It's a good argument, yeah. I was sold on that argument watching that. Nancy Allen, who's such a lovely person in things like Dress to Kill, and indeed RoboCop, plays such a convincing monster in Carrie. She's just hideous. And I actually quite like, I think the movie needs the comic relief stuff with her and a goofy John Travolta where they're both slapping each other. They both sort of hate each other. And he is instrumental in the pig's blood stuff because he just wants more blowjobs. Carrie is extraordinary. I'm still really haunted by Carrie. The ending's been copied so many times, the final jump scare, but it's amazing how all of it, like The Shining, actually feels fresh when you rewatch it. And if anything, it's the dramatic stuff that holds up better than ever. And Piper Laurie as the mum is astonishing.
And again, Julianne Moore's a fantastic actress, but she kind of came across like she literally you knew she was doing it because it was a good paycheck. And that was the whole thing. Like in terms of the 2013 remake, my question was always why.
Yeah, and do you know what? I was really looking forward to it because it was directed by, I think I've forgotten her surname, the lady that did Boys Don't Cry. Kimberly Peirce, who was from the strength of that, was a tremendous filmmaker. And I thought, wow, this is going to be really cool. And Julianne Moore, I was on the fence about, I was going to give Chloe Grace Moretz a chance, even though I was bewildered by the casting. But yeah, the final result, I can only assume, was studio influenced. I can't imagine Kimberly Peirce set out to make the movie that was released.
Test audiences.
It has everything, the ending, the CGI, it bungles everything so badly. I actually thought the TV, I think it was a miniseries, but the good casting of Angela Bettis in the TV remake, which wasn't particularly great, but that was a better film than Carrie 2013, because at least they nailed the casting. Angela Bettis, if anyone's going to follow in Sissy Spacek's footsteps, it's 20-something Angela Bettis. And even Carrie 2 The Rage is better than the 2013 Carrie. Oh, God. I'm just going to... I can't think about it anymore.
Oh.
And it's a shame because, again, it's even worse because I was looking... I've never been sceptical of remakes without good reason. I was looking forward to this on the strength of they might well pull this off and give us something different, but at the same time faithful to what's gone before. Oh, it's a shame. Oh. Anyways, on to happier pastures. What's your number one, Sarah?
My number one is the 2013 version of Carrie. No, it's not really, honestly. I'm joking.
It's a neglected masterpiece.
Yeah, I'm now going to poo-poo all your comments and just say how great it was. No, my number one is Creepshow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Lovely Creepshow.
We love Creepshow. It's so much fun. There's so many great little stories. Stephen King is involved in it in many ways, and he plays the absolutely brilliant Geordie Verrill.
Meteor shit.
Yeah, meteor shit, and I'll be dipped in shit.
Joe, there's a lovely story because Joe Hill's in it as well, isn't he?
Yes.
They were filming sort of through the night, and they stopped off for a burger. And Joe said he realised while they were in there, the staff were looking at him funny. And Joe Hill realised that he hadn't taken his makeup off from where he gets hit. The burger bar staff were thinking this is like some awful deadbeat dad trying to bribe his son with a burger. Which I just thought was a wonderful little anecdote.
That's good. Wonderful. Yeah.
All the stories are just a lot of fun. They have some great actors in them as well, and I love the little wraparound story in between. It's a lot more detailed than it is in Creepshow 2.
Yeah.
Yes. There are some good stories in there. I actually really like the one with Leslie Nielsen.
Yes.
And Ted Danson.
Ted Danson is great, and he makes a really awesome zombie as well.
Yeah.
Yes. And
when they come out of the sea, he's fantastic.
Yeah, and the idea of being buried up to your neck in sand was always quite haunting.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
That's truly gruesome without necessarily being massively bloody. And it's an amazingly cast film because I remember Ed Harris and his amazing dancing in the Father's Day segment.
Father's Day one,
I Want My Cake.
Yeah.
I think everyone's a winner. It's unusual. Anthology movies usually have one real dud, but I think Creepshow has 5 really good ones.
Yeah, I suppose I'm not that keen on the last one, with the cockroaches.
Oh, I see. I always loved that one, but mostly for the money shot at the end.
Yeah.
Which was an iconic FX moment. But maybe the rest of it, maybe it's just
the crate was fantastic.
Yes.
And we just love Fluffy. Wasn't Fluffy I think that was one of Tom Savini's first things he created from scratch or something for a movie. He's really proud of him.
Yeah, because he'd been doing obviously the zombie stuff and he'd been doing the slasher movie Killings, and I think this was his dream of creating a monster, like you said, from scratch. So yeah, it was a big breakthrough for him. Did a great monster for the Tales from the Dark Side series, which was a few years later, which was in a similar vein. Yeah, Fluffy. Adrienne Barbeau as the wife from hell is hilarious.
Yeah, she's awful, isn't she?
Awful, obnoxious.
In a good
monster.
way.
Yeah, Creepshow.
Yeah, and her husband, who just kind of... He does it in a very sneaky way, really, doesn't he? It's like, I found this monster that's killing people. I'll get it to eat my wife.
Yeah. I've been back to Creepshow 2 quite a few times, and I used to like it a lot, but I think it's a bit ropey, Creepshow 2, in retrospect. Compared
to the first one, it is. But I don't dislike Creepshow 2. It has some good bits, but I don't quite like the way they kind of animated the wraparound, didn't they? And the creep was nowhere near as good. Although the creep was Tom Savini in the back of the removal truck, wasn't he, at the beginning? Yeah,
throwing out comments.
Yeah, with a weird kind of chin mask thing going on. But there was the first story in Creepshow 2, the Indian chief, the Native American wooden chief, that I really enjoyed that one. But I think the one that I wasn't too keen on was the raft with the weird floating tarpaulin in the middle of the water. Ooh, scary.
Yeah, which is kind
It
of
was
eco
rubbish.
horror sort of thing. Yeah, it's
but
somewhere
it was.
between the Blob and and a
Yeah,
bin
it just
bag.
looked like. Yeah, it basically was like a floating tarpaulin.
It's coming this way very slowly.
Ooh.
Works far better as a short story.
Yes, I
Yeah.
haven't read the short story, I don't
Yeah,
think.
it definitely works better as a short story in terms of it's better in your imagination than what they were able to achieve for the time.
Yeah, because the short stories are I mean, he's done so many terrific short stories, and they don't always pay off as much. Although I quite like. Did you ever watch the Twilight Zone episode Grandma, based on his short story? That's pretty effective.
Yeah,
Mm.
That
that's one of his one of my favourite short stories of his. It's from Salem.
yes.
Oh, cool.
Because I always liked Children of the Corn as a short story, and none of the movies are particularly good.
No.
They truly bungled it. Even when they went back and redid it from scratch after about 7 sequels to the original Linda Hamilton one, they still messed it up. And they said it in Vietnam era, and I don't quite get it, because I feel that could have been expanded into something quite disturbing and interesting. Creepshow is a worthy winner indeed.
Yeah. I mean, there's been so many others out. I've got lots of other ones I'd like to mention that didn't actually make it on my list. But I think for me, as much as, The Shining was iconic and fantastic and just beautiful, I do have a massive affection for the sillier, more cartoony, monstery type things.
Yeah.
That's why Creepshow is my number one.
And he does too, doesn't he? And you can see that
Mm.
through everything. The werewolf in Silver Bullet, and even the zombies in Pet Sematary, and some of his bad guys, Sleepwalkers, Graveyard Shift has got this weird rat monster thing. I think that's cool. And I always thought Creepshow was ahead of the curve. Like, I presume there was, but I can't think of any movie before that had such attention to giving it the comic book look with the framing and everything that's so detailed and colourful in it. Nice. Matt, you're number one.
Shawshank Redemption.
Wonderful.
It amazes me watching it, knowing that it wasn't a success initially, and it's one of those things that the arc bends towards justice, and it amazes me that it wasn't an immediate roaring success, precisely because of, again, the warmth of it, the performances, the music, even the changes, because obviously in the novella Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption, he's called Red because he's a ginger Irishman.
Yeah, of course.
But at the same time, I can't imagine anybody but Morgan Freeman in that role. And I think there's probably more than a few of us, I say this, who would like to have Morgan Freeman as their inner monologue. It's just, and like Tim, I mean, obviously everybody sort of goes to Morgan Freeman by default because he's wonderful, but Tim Robbins captures Andy's reserve in such a perfect way. Like, it's like there's a lot of subtlety to the performance, that the performances in that film, and there's this kind of like incredible warmth and decency. It just, it's one of my top 10 films, full stop, let alone top 10 adaptations of Stephen King stuff, precisely because it's kind of, it's really important. And I think particularly in the time that we're in right now, is you can't lose hope. No matter what situation, fundamental belief is that, no matter what situation you're in life, doing the right thing is painful and difficult, and sometimes you've got to do the right thing in a bad situation. And the thing I love about The Shawshank Redemption is precisely because it's an example of someone who is rewarded for his goodness, despite the fact that he's, in the worst place possible, facing the worst possible plate. And I agree with you, Steve, in that it'd still be a great film, but you needed the closure of that, them facing one another again. to really kind of tie a bow on it. So that's my top of my list.
It's so wonderful, yeah. And the one thing in life that's worse than the 2013 Carrie remake is the fact that I remember being about 15 and having watched Shawshank and being in love with it and blown away by it. I watched the Oscars that year, where I watched over what seemed about 17 hours of television, two movies that I loved so much, Pulp Fiction and Shawshank Redemption, being completely trounced by Forrest Gump as the best movie of the year. And I didn't hate Forrest Gump. I didn't have a particular vendetta against Forrest Gump. But then I did, because Shawshank and Pulp Fiction meant so much to me. And actually on camera you could see Samuel L. Jackson mouthing the word shit at one point. And that summed it up, really.
Yeah.
We may have made an error again, like we do with Out of Africa.
The thing is, you always knew Forrest Gump was going to dominate, because to borrow the line from Tropic Thunder, Tom Hanks never goes full retard.
Indeed. Yeah. I kidded myself. It might not be that way.
No.
Astonishing. But yeah, it's a beautiful piece of work and a huge amount of time for Frank Darabont. My number one, in a similar vein, actually, I could have gone two ways. Shawshank was almost number one. Carrie was also number one because it meant so much to me growing up. But I went for the sour end where there is no hope. So I put The Mist at number one. The horror fan took over. And I do think that this is truly a classic horror film. I don't know how old you have to be a classic, but this still blows me away. I don't think I've ever been so impacted by a horror movie, definitely in this century, that's come out. I think what stood out for The Mist is it came at a period where obviously there were loads of remakes, but horror as a whole in America especially was reliving or trying to relive the spirit of 70s American horror. So we had the Rob Zombie stuff, we had nastier stuff like Hostel, but the only one that really captured the irony and the cynicism and the hopelessness of George Romero was The Mist, which is another siege movie, another American siege horror movie where people act like real people. They make the wrong decisions. They make dumb decisions. They're selfish. They fight with each other. The threat no one understands. Everybody's panicking or joining Marcia Gay Holden's cult-ish experience that she's created in this supermarket, overwhelmed by these incredible Lovecraftian creatures. I just think it's incredible. And I was totally blown away by the finale, which is maybe the sourest ending in Hollywood horror history. We just can't quite comprehend what's happened, but it all makes sense given how nihilistic everything that's come before has been. Plus it has Dead Can Dance and the Host of Seraphim as the soundtrack to the apocalypse. So it's not really the apocalypse, but it is for this character played by Thomas Jane so well, as Matt said. A great underrated actor, and it's great that he found another tremendous role in a King property with 1922. But yeah, I think it's a completely on point post 9/11 horror movie by a director that pulled no punches and indeed took budget cuts just so he could have the ending he wanted, which is different to the novella. But I really like the novella too, which obviously was written in a very different time. But Darabont adapting this at this particular time made sense. And man, it pulls no punches. It's totally upsetting, but it's a great monster movie as well, and that's good enough for me anyway.
King and Darabont go really well together, and
yes,
I kind of wish that they worked together more.
Yeah,
I mean, my opinion, probably quite a controversial one, is for me, I kind of interested in after Darabont walked.
Yeah.
For me, I think his seasons were the peak of the show. I understand his popularity. I think a lot of people have watched it out of habit. Ironically, the show's almost kind of become a zombie itself. But yeah, Darabont and King go really well together. I mean, the Green Mile, which is obviously an incredibly long.
Yeah, Green Mile's great.
Filming places is equally. You know, I struggled for my top slot between the Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption, but in the end, I kind of had to go with the warmer of the two options.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I get that. Actually, they're polar opposites in terms of it's the Mist. What stage did Darabont leave The Walking Dead? I'm never quite clear.
Was it season 1 or I think it was season 2, wasn't it?
Really early.
Yeah, it was pretty early on. Yeah.
And he's very bitter about it from memory, isn't he?
Yeah.
It was an angry Frank.
Well, yeah, I don't blame him really. I don't think they would allow him to go the way that he wanted to go with it. So he just went, okay, I'll see you later, and then we got landed with Scott Gimple instead.
Yeah.
Who I can't stand.
No,
Yeah.
and the thing of it is that it's so often the case in mainstream media that they hire distinctive creators and then expend massive amounts of energy on stamping out what makes them distinct.
Yeah.
Like a classic example is although it's a Marvel superhero movie, Edgar Wright was doing Ant-Man at one point.
Yeah.
And like, if you're going to get Edgar Wright to do a movie, you want an Edgar Wright movie.
Mm.
And don't get me wrong, Peyton Reed did a perfectly acceptable job. The sequel's awful, I think. But why get somebody who's a distinctive filmmaker and then do all you can to frustrate them artistically?
Mm.
You might as well go for like a...
It's just for the name, isn't it? So they can say, oh, this person was on this. And
you might as well go for an Akiva Goldsman. That's your whole intention. But no, it staggers me with that. And I watched a couple of seasons afterwards out of habit, but then I was just like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. So I kind of, there's too much other stuff I can watch. So yeah, The Walking Dead and I walked away from each other pretty early.
Oh, I've still stuck with it. Although Gimple does really annoy me. But Greg Nicotero's still in it, so it still has a lot of positives.
Well, yeah, if he's still there for the FX, then it's always gonna be visually entertaining.
Yes, exactly. Going back to The Mist, though, Stephen, did you ever watch the series, the 2017 series?
I refer you to the comments about Carrie 2030.
Yeah.
Okay.
In honesty, I can't be too critical because I didn't stay the full course because I realised life was short. But yeah, I was crying into my gin, to be honest with you. And when that happens, that's never a good thing. So I think I watched the first 3, but it was just so cheap and rubbish. Oh, it was just so depressing. But not in the way The Mist is depressing. The real Mist.
No.
Well, I wouldn't even say The Mist is depressing. It's nihilistic.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes, and there's an absolutely a strong case that nihilism and horror go together like, peanut butter and jam.
Yeah.
It's essentially the root of all cosmic horror, isn't it? Is the fragility of human life in the face of uncaring cosmic forces. And,
For sure.
And yeah, I remember seeing The Mist, the film. I got through the pilot episode of the TV show, and I was just much like with Steve. I'm like, I fear I may lose something fundamental for my soul if I continue to watch this show.
That was that feeling.
Yeah, just that sense of I feel it's draining my will to live with every frame. But I remember the ending, and like there's the way that it's framed. You kind of like it makes sense, and the fact that you don't see it, and like you think it could have ended there, and it would have been like, oh my god, I understand that. But then obviously, when they turn up and you realise how futile his actions actually have been,
yeah,
that's like a sucker punch.
It is.
Yeah.
It's absolutely harrowing. Yeah.
I mean, I remember like Jane's acting during that point.
It holds on his face, doesn't it, for what seems like a long time.
Yeah.
He's so underrated as an actor. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, the TV series probably has its fans, and that's absolutely fine. There's a few I didn't stay with. I actually really enjoyed the book of Under the Dome, but I didn't stay with the TV show of that either, which seemed a bit bland.
That's one of his books that I, it's a really, really ambitious piece of work, but it's not one of his best.
Sure, yeah.
It works, but it's sort of if you were going to grade it, it's like C plus King.
Yeah, there is a distinction, isn't there? We can breeze through a couple of things. I mean, just thinking of TV shows, two I really liked, although in one case I've only seen the first season. One was Mr. Mercedes.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, Brendan Gleeson, who's one of my heroes, is just so good in that, as is everybody, actually. But Mr. Mercedes has 3 seasons, am I right in thinking?
Yeah, because it's 3 books, isn't it?
End of Watch,
and End of Watch.
Yeah.
I'd also say another series, it's a mini-series, The Outsider.
Oh, yeah, that's very creepy, yes, the HBO, yeah.
And that actually went in harder than the book did, particularly with like the end and climax.
Yeah.
It's a lot more brutal than the actual book is. But yeah, I thought The Outsider was wonderful. If only because Holly Gibney, I think, is one of my favourite characters of his.
She's great, isn't she?
Yeah.
What I also liked, which I don't know if it gets talked about much, but at the time I thought it was wonderful, and I was really charmed by the book, which is the James Franco, which is why I mentioned him earlier in Era 11/22/63, which was a 6-part, sort of a shorter series than usual. I really enjoyed that. I thought Franco nailed that. That was one of the more optimistic ones.
And it was a wonderful book as well.
It's lovely, isn't it? Yeah.
Particularly as well is I quite liked the sheer kind of audacity of showing that things would actually have got worse if Kennedy had lived.
Yes.
Which I thought was a really, really quite a nice little conceit.
Yeah, I thought so too. I remember being absolutely moved by the book. There's a few others. I mean, we've covered pretty much the majors in the course of this. Some of the other stuff we haven't mentioned is relatively second rate. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I always thought the movie Cell, which isn't a book I'm hugely fond of, but the movie of Cell has a decent first few minutes, but then falls apart.
Yeah, no,
I've not been on paper that should have worked.
Yes, it should have been a proper kind of hit, really. Yeah. And again, it wasn't from one of his greatest books, but it was still, like you said, a concept that should have worked as a pacey, action-driven horror. Dreamcatcher is another strange one. Did either of you see that one?
Yeah. No. It's a fantastic cast as well, isn't it? Damien Lewis, Jason Lee,
Morgan Freeman. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, but again, that's what I call bad but interesting, and it's an absolute. You know, he tries to put everything but the kitchen sink in there.
Yeah.
You know, and shit weasels were always going to be a hard sell.
Yeah.
And clearly that was the case.
He is a total mess. And an expensive one as well. Yeah.
Oh, God, very much so.
Which is a shame, actually. I remember seeing it in the cinema and looking forward to it, even though I knew it wasn't one of the greatest books of his. But yeah, it's a strange hybrid of bits and pieces from other stories that work better there.
Tommyknockers was another one. That's a fascinating book. I wouldn't say I enjoy it. I respect it.
Yes.
And there's some brilliant sequences in it. The little mini series they did of that, I thought was an interesting failure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that had an interesting cast as well. I remember Tracy Lords in that. The Langoliers was an odd one. That's got some slightly goofy CGI monsters that I don't think looked good even in the 90s.
No. Once Piglet with that I thought was particularly funny, though.
Any others that we missed? I mean, there's the Richard Bachman thing. So we mentioned Thinner. Thinner is an interesting adaptation of a book that I liked, with a particularly good makeup for the protagonist. And the other one is The Running Man, which...
Do you know, that very nearly made it onto my top 10.
Loads of fun.
Precisely because it is fun. It's the only thing that it actually shares with the novella is the contest.
Yes.
But then it's hard not to love a film that has Jesse Ventura walk in like...
Yeah,
his power armor and goes, "I'm not wearing this shit, and you can't make me."
It's fun.
It's classic Arnie. It's a good bad movie, in my opinion.
It is. It's so 80s. It has a Harold Faltermeyer score as well. It's just wonderfully 80s, and the outfits are great.
And Mick Fleetwood as the voice of rebellion.
And I love Richard Dawson as the game show host, who was from the American version of Family Fortunes. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. That should be one to revisit at some stage. Sleepwalkers, I think we mentioned, but that's pretty unique, really. This mother and son duo of shapeshifters that are looking for virgins in a small American town, and someone gets killed with a corn on the cob. That's quite a fun one, actually. I think it's getting a Singing Dancing Blu-ray release, and it's possibly overdue, although it is in the tackier end of things, and it's not meant to be serious, but the incest angle makes it fairly uniquely icky. And it has Alice Krieger as the mum, as the sexy, shape-shifting, cat-fearing mum. And cats are the good guys.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys about Stephen King. What do you think he is, a cat person or a dog person?
Cat, I would say, but I'm
not
a cat person.
He must be a cat person, because
he's a dog person because he has Molly, I think. His dog's like this terrier. I'd say he's a dog person, but he's not adverse to cats.
I was going to say he writes the best parts for cats.
Yeah,
the cats always seem to be a big part in it. Obviously, Cat's Eyes and Pet Cemetery and stuff, and your ones in your Cujos and stuff like that are always big evil monsters, whereas the cats are just cool
devices, aren't they? Because with cats, the thing that makes them horrible is the claws, and with dogs, it's the teeth. Claws and teeth are two primal fears. Because, interestingly enough, I read an interview with Wes Craven when he was talking about Nightmare on Elm Street, and originally Freddy Krueger was going to have big metal teeth, wasn't he?
Oh yes.
So I can't, when I see sort of like photos of Freddy Krueger, I'm trying to imagine him with like these big steel kind of dentures.
Or dog teeth. Whereas he's got cat claws. And
I'll say another one that really slipped under my radar for years in much the same way Thinner did. And it's got an amazing cast, is Needful Things.
Oh, I love Needful Things.
I was going to bring that one up because none of us have mentioned it yet. That was another one of my favourite books.
Yeah.
The book's huge fun.
Yeah.
Leland Gaunt.
The sequence where Pangborn's using like the magic tricks and kind of the way that they almost become like exaggerations. So like, the old snake in the jar of peanuts things when it bites it. It's King's small town Americana stuff, I think, is always going to be my soft spot.
Oh, it's so much fun. Max von Sydow as the devil.
And Bonnie Bedelia as well.
Yeah, Ed Harris. Yeah, Bonnie Bedelia. Yeah, absolutely. And it's got, I think it's J.T. Walsh that has a great bit in a bar with Achy Breaky Heart playing on the jukebox. Yeah. Needful Things is
connected to Stand By Me as well, or The Body, or Stand By Me, because the bully who Kiefer Sutherland plays.
Yeah, Ace Merrill is mentioned.
Yeah.
He's in Needful Things as well.
Yeah. So I mean, There's
a lot of crossovers.
Well,
yes.
He approaches it with the consistency of like comic book universes. So, and like going back to Joe Hill, I reread his books recently, and they cross over a lot of the Joe Hill and Stephen King stuff. So particularly in Nosferatu, there's a bit in the book where they're looking for the son's phone on one of those Find Me apps. And there's a Pennywise circus on the map. So there's a lot of crossover between the two. I think he even mentions Christine in Nosferatu as well, which I really like.
That's so cool, isn't it?
Yeah. I've got a couple of films that came out very recently. One that I really liked and one that I really wasn't all that keen on. The one I really liked was one that you suggested to me, Stephen. It was I See You.
Oh, I See You is great. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was really good. That was one of those ones that you didn't really know. It kind of took a bit of a twist in the middle and went off in a different direction. So to start off with, you think it's some kind of supernatural thing, and then in the middle, it all kind of comes together.
Yes.
And then at the end, it twists again.
Yes, it does. Yeah, because you think a couple of times you're pretty much sure you know where this is going.
Yeah,
And you've seen it before.
you
You're
think
still really gripped, but
Yeah.
and then
And then it goes a different way.
and the final kicker is great, isn't it? The very
Yeah.
last bit where you think, oh, I get it. So that was the plan all along. Yeah, I See You. I was a huge fan of. That's on Netflix now, isn't it?
That is indeed.
Right,
and then one that was. Sorry.
I'll add that to my list then.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Helen Hunt's very good in it, actually.
Yep. There's a couple of good people.
Yeah,
John
nothing
Tenney
about
plays
it. Yes.
dad. Yeah. Owen Teague is in it as well. Oh, and you've got Sam Trammell in there as well, who is Sam in True Blood. He just pops up as the boyfriend.
Yes.
Oh, True Blood. That was a show before it jumped the shark.
It was, wasn't it? I loved that show until about season 5.
Yeah, I distinctly remember when I was watching it, right? And the point for me where I was done with it was when the Werepanthers turned up.
Yeah.
And I actually sat
that
there
just
and
got
said out loud,
stupid.
this is ridiculous. And I'm like, this is a show about vampires. I mean, it's a metaphor for LGBT rights, I think.
Yeah.
But there was a point where it was just it.
Yeah, you could put up with the Twilighty werewolves, that aren't real werewolves. They're just people that turn into wolves. But then when they went down the werepanther thing, you're just like, no, hang on.
It felt like it turned into fan fiction of itself.
Yeah, and the ending was awful. The ending destroyed me. I was like, why did I stick with this? But it did have some great people in it. I did enjoy it for a while.
Yeah.
The other one that I didn't enjoy that was a Stephen King adaptation that came out same time was In the Tall Grass.
No, I didn't enjoy that.
Oh yeah, that's a bit. Yeah, I was looking forward to that.
Yeah, it wasn't as good as you thought it was going to be, was it? It just went a bit random and a bit weird, and had a very annoying kid in it.
But the story, which was a collaboration with his son, I didn't feel made the Landon either.
No, not one of the greatest.
Now there's one Full Throttle. Joe Hill's new short story collection.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah, that first story they wrote together with the biker gang, which is basically with bikers. That, I think, is a great film waiting to happen.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
If you did kind of like a old school tobacco blue collar masculine cast, like if you got Stephen Lang in it,
yes,
that would work as a film.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was really visceral, wasn't it? I really like that.
It's got a kind of Breaking Bad vibe to it.
Yeah, no. In the Tall Grass was disappointing.
It was,
especially as it was by the guy that did Cube and Splice and things like that. And it started off well, and I did lose interest at a certain point, unfortunately. They're not all winners for sure. Well, does anybody have any more King adaptations that we haven't mentioned? I think we've covered a lot, actually.
Yeah, pretty much. There was, of course, the Creepshow TV series that came off the back of the original movies that showed last year.
Which is good fun, yeah.
And they had a lovely adaptation of the Joe Hill story by the lakes of Lake Pontchartrain.
Yes, that was nice. Yeah.
A lovely sort of reverential adaptation of a particularly a story that I think you have to reread to truly appreciate. It's not immediate what happens, and that's what I like sometimes with short fiction, is you kind of have to go back to it to really... It's kind of like archaeology, much like writing, in the sense of you've got this big idea, you absorb it, and then you just refine it over time. But that's a lovely little adaptation of the short fiction.
They did some nice things in that series, didn't they? It's in good hands, and it's coming back for another season, and the sources were strong as well. Yeah, very cool. Any others? I think I've exhausted my list.
Yeah, me too.
Another disappointing one. I hate to disappoint, mate. We'll into something awesome. A Good Marriage.
Oh, I didn't watch that one. I wasn't compelled by that one.
It's in All Dark, No Stars, which I was saying to Sarah that she should be.
Of course.
Because it's got 1922 and A Good Marriage in it. The short story is brilliant. The film just kind of... And King wrote the screenplay for that as well. An interesting failure.
Yeah, It's in that category. Yeah, the screenplay, because he wrote the screenplay for the 89 Pet Cemetery, which I thought was a little disappointing in retrospect, although at the time I was very much a fan. Yeah, it's a tricky business. Well, that's probably it, actually, for our rampage through the King world. I think we did a decent job of trying to capture as many as we possibly could. Yeah. Thank you to both of you. Thanks, Matt. Let's find out just briefly about what you're working on at the moment, or what have you just had released. We've mentioned Laughing Boy on the podcast.
Yeah, at the moment,
update is
Until She Sings, Laughing Boy, which is probably my most Stephen King-esque.
Sure.
In terms of for me, it was a way to talk about genuine sort of emotional stuff, but using supernatural metaphors as text and subtext.
Sure.
Nothing Keeps Me Anywhere, I've just recently released. I've actually gone ahead and written a fantasy novel.
Nice.
Which will hopefully, I'm just in the process of feedback from my beta readers and sorting out the cover. But I'm all available. If you're on Amazon, I'm on there as M B Blissett.
Cool.
Also, my website, which is currently under reconstruction, is www.mbblissett. I'm also on Facebook. If you're listening and you want to know more, please get in touch. Like I said, being an independent writer is its own reward, but obviously I'm up against publishing and everything else. So I've got people who really, really enjoy my stuff, and being my own version of Disney is its own reward.
Nice, man. Thank you. And Sarah, what have you got coming up, or what are you looking forward to indulging in these autumnal months?
Well, we briefly touched on it a little while ago, but we do have the return of The Walking Dead.
Yeah, so hey, what's the deal? We're in season 11.
10.
No, 10.
No, 10 didn't finish.
Got it.
Because of COVID, they didn't manage to finish all of 10. So we've got the season 10 finale, which I believe is showing 3rd or 4th of October. So very, very soon. And it ended on a cliffhanger. It's had its ups and downs. It got very, very good towards the end of this last season. So I'm really, really looking forward to the finale of season 10. And there's rumours of a million spin-offs coming off the back of this, because also we had the news that season 11 was going to be the final season of The Walking Dead. Yes. And then they went, so we're going to now do this one, and this one. And I think there is one, showing literally the day after the season 10 finale of, is it The Walking Dead, The World's End, or The World Beyond, or something like that?
Yeah.
Which I will be checking out, but to be fair, to be honest with you, I'm not holding out a lot of hope for it.
I always sort of go with what that Simpsons episode with Troy McClure. Spin-offs! Is there anything more exciting?
They may be blowing their load right there. Yeah, I read something about, was there going to be feature film spin-offs with Andrew Lincoln's character as well?
I think that's all been called off now.
Last
time I heard, they're not doing anything with that. But yeah, they were thinking of doing that for a little while, didn't they? But I think that's all fallen on its arse. I don't think that's happening, which is probably a good thing. I mean, they'll probably do the same thing as what they've always done and said, like what they said with Fear the Walking Dead. They're like, it'll be a completely separate series to The Walking Dead. None of it'll contain any of the characters, and then they put Morgan over and Dwight over. So they'll probably do the same with these other ones. I don't know if it's true. I think I saw something on Facebook and I didn't actually click on it or read it, but I think they're thinking of doing a Carol and Daryl show or something.
Oh no, well, like a sitcom.
I don't know. That's what it kind of sounds like, doesn't it? So
with a crazy gay neighbour.
Yeah, it's kind of scary times in the Walking Dead universe. You think maybe they should probably just knock it on the head and leave it as is now. But I am looking forward to the finale, and I'm looking forward to season 11 as well. It's kind of sad, really, because I've said this the whole time this has started, that I'm going to watch this like from season 1 again. sit and watch the whole lot again. And I really want to do that, but it needs to finish first because I'm not going to get time.
I feel the same way about Game of Thrones in that up until season 6, it's pretty much perfect.
Yeah, I was a massive Game of Thrones fan as well.
And Benioff and Weiss, I don't envy them trying to adapt. The task of adaptation is particularly difficult.
Yeah,
it just felt like one of the things that I felt was that before they went off the books, characters did things that appeared to be stupid, but they made sense because you knew the characters well. So, like, for instance, like Tyrion does the trial by combat thing twice, because first time it worked for him, but particularly later on with the whole Daenerys turns into Hitler was just the press, and I mean the one that got me the most was Varys. Varys, who's basically like the J. Edgar Hoover of Westeros, just turns into a moron.
Yeah. They did that last season. They did spectacularly mess up on that. I think a lot of people went, "Hang on a minute, what's going on here?" I think the only thing that worked for me in the finale was the ending that they gave the Hound.
Yeah,
who is one of my favourite characters.
Yeah,
and they gave him a good send off.
Yeah, because you needed the Clegane Bowl to happen.
Yeah,
and particularly, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Martin does it in the books if he finishes them.
Yeah. Do we think he will?
I do.
Yeah,
I genuinely do.
I suppose he's got a lot to live up to now because what they've done with everything that's happened since. He's now probably bricking it, thinking, "Oh God, how am I going to make this better than these?"
Yeah, I mean, another writer in a similar situation that is Patrick Rothfuss, with his series of books, Name of the Wind. Like, I've been waiting for the third one of that for about, I think, 8 years.
Oh God.
And
it's a long wait.
I mean, like, there's George R.R. Martin owes me nothing. Patrick Rothfuss owes me nothing. But speaking from my relative lack of in terms of a writer with an audience, like, I understand how important it is to kind of meet and exceed your audience's expectations. So if you start something, you owe it to your audience to finish. Precisely because an unfinished story is a tragedy to me. And I just feel this kind of... I subscribe to George R.R. Martin's newsletter, and I think I'm going to have to stop because he tells me all of this other stuff he's doing, like Fire and Blood, and I'm sort of sat there like Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver going, "Where's the book, George?" George. And it's a real shame. I understand it, but at the same time, so as an author, I understand it. As a fan,
not so much. Yeah, it's kind of hard to. I think with The Walking Dead, they obviously the comics have ended, so they can't necessarily disappoint things too much.
No,
when it comes to the ending, but they don't have the book to follow up, so they can basically do whatever they want, and they probably will.
Yeah. I hate to say it though, but I watched Sharknado 3 and I can confirm George R.R. Martin was sadly killed by an errant shark.
Oh damn! I forgot about that.
Yeah, so that's kind of put the kibosh and everything.
Yeah, that is it. No more books.
As were Jedward, which obviously is another cultural crisis in itself. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, thanks, guys.
Glad I was sat down when you told me that information.
I should have warned you. I'm so sorry. Just had a number of viewer complaints. So next episode will come to you in the month of October, and actually it will be broadcast from the 30th of October, a day before All Hallows Eve.
Yay.
And the main talking point next month will be another iconic, massive, monumental thing that's got an anniversary this year. We'll be talking about the Psycho movies. So Psycho 1, 2, 3, 4. We will probably briefly mention the Psycho remake in the same kind of tone we did Carrie 2013. You never know.
Joy.
Who didn't want Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates? Perfect casting, I thought. and a slightly ickier, more explicit masturbation scene. And then from there on, because it's Halloween, we'll be having a rip-roaring trip through some of our scariest movie memories, looking at some of what we think are the most frightening things that we have seen. We've touched on a couple actually today. Session 9 was always high in my list of things that disturbed me and still haunt me to this day. So it will be an interesting ramble through that, I think. Thank you to Matt for coming on. Much appreciated.
Thank you guys. It's been wonderful, and certainly as well is if there's ever a call to come back, just give us a shout, because it's really nice to just nerd out with people who get the genre.
It really is. This year more than ever before, I think. Yeah, absolutely. It's a total pleasure. Thank you, Sarah, as well, as ever.
You're welcome.
Much appreciated. Thanks also to Pete for making his little Hitchcockian cameo before he jetted off with some Hollywood sluts or whatever it was he does it on a Sunday. And indeed,
someone's got to do it.
Yeah, it is. And also we should probably nod to Tony Newton, who edits the podcast and is doing a fine job. So that's about it for tonight. But thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Goodbye.